Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Irish Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Happy Monday. Hope everybody had a great weekend. Hope everybody had a great Sunday celebrating Easter. If you got to link up with any family members or eat some really good food, hopefully everybody had a fun and safe weekend. But we are back this week to kick off another week of Notre Dame's offseason. And Ryan, there's no better way to get this kicked off than with a buy-sell hold like we normally do. Now, thread went up over the weekend. Once again, you guys did not disappoint with a lot of the questions that came in. Very much looking forward to getting started with this. And if this does happen to be your first buy, sell, hold, this is something that we like to do for our premium message board members. You see it scrolling down there at the bottom of the screen, boards at irishbreakdown.com. And the premise of the show, you submit a topic and your submission will generate some thought between Brian and I. And after some discussion, we decide whether we buy it, we sell it, or we hold it if we just don't have enough of the information. Now, this isn't like a normal mailbag like we do on Fridays. So if you just put your buy, sell, hold in the chat, we're not going to be able to get to it because we have so many awesome submissions to get to from our premium message board subscribers. But, man, I am very, very much ready to get this thing kicked off, man. Going to be a good one today, Brian.
Yes. And Trevor figured out how to unban Tommy guns. So to some people, that's going to make them happy. To others, that's probably a little bit of a disappointment for how this show's going to start. So we'll see if we can find a way to get some of those other ones in there. Trev and I will work on that after the show. But yeah, a lot of great submissions, Trev, and I mean we had a lot of real good ones. So let's go ahead and rock and roll, dive right into them. I hope everybody had an amazing Easter. I did. There's a lot of good reflection time yesterday, some good prayer time yesterday, and of course it was also our 18th wedding anniversary yesterday. So Ange and I watched our the video of our wedding, which was really cool and also very sad. Like her grandpa was there, my grandma and grandpa were there. They've both passed, and my mom's dad was there, and he's passed. And then just seeing what happened to my physique has passed away as well. I said, look, honey, my chest and stomach used to be on the same level. Imagine that. So, but no, it was really cool though, man. Just kind of looking back at it and thinking through those times, and then obviously everything else going on. So. Great weekend. And now I'm ready to rock and roll the buy, sell, hold. So I'm going to, my mouth is still pretty sore from a surgery. So I'll try my best to power through the whole show, and Trev, try not to make me laugh too much, because that's when it hurts the most. So let's be all business today, baby. No, no joking around. So let's rock and roll. And Salty got us kicked off, Trev, with a really good one to start.
Regardless of whether it withstands court challenges, President Trump's proposal to limit the number of transfers, one without having to sit a year, and place a limit on NIL money are two major steps in the right direction.
So, number one, I don't know that I necessarily I'm going to sell this, and here's why I'm going to sell this. Number one, I have no problem with President Trump trying to step involved in here, and responses, oh, you got enough things to worry about. I'm like, well, this is kind of, if you're going to be in an elected office, you should be able to walk and chew gum at the same time, right? And I understand that this is something that needs to be enacted upon. I don't think that an executive order does a whole lot. Now, people properly understanding what an executive order does, it doesn't change the law. It's not a law. What it does, however, is it tries to get the different, cabinets to try to start acting, and it tries to push the needle down the road, right? And it won't stand up to any court scrutiny. So it really has no power, other than the fact that it's an attempt to try to really get this process really rolling. Like, hey, I'm going to act, and now it's time for you to follow it. But here's a couple things that I have with my understanding of it. Number one is, I don't think I have no desire to put a cap on NIL money. What I have a desire to do is to stop NIL money from just being collectives handing payouts just because. The whole spirit of NIL was benefiting from your name, image, and likeness. And as I've said 1,000 times, I have no desire to cap that. If a business feels that CJ Carr is worth $1 million to advertise with their business, then they should be willing to pay him $1 million. What I have a problem with is some business owner who just wants to give CJ Carr $1 million just because, and there not be any kind of, quid pro quo, so to speak, in return, where he's got to do X number of appearances and tweet this and tweet that and things like that. It is meant to be NIL. And again, there should be no caps on that. I think if they really were serious about this, what they would say is, here's what we're going to do with with the rev share. We're going to split the rev share. Every player, as I've said before, every player on scholarship gets the same amount of money. Number one. And then number two, NIL, you can't just hand a kid cash. It can't just be some collective. We're going to get rid of the collectives and go back to making this a thing where you're going to work with businesses. And if a alum owns a car dealership in South Bend and he, again, wants to pay $1 million to CJ Carr and a bunch of different Notre Dame players, then he has every right to do so. It's his money. And he finds value in that. There simply should be, as I said before, some sort of give and take. I pay you this money. You have to show up for X number of deals. You have to show up for this event. You have to tweet certain things from your social medias. We're going to get you a car. You have to tweet about it. And, there's certain things like that are part of that give and take. We're going to pay you this, and then you're going to do this with our company. And again, there should be no cap on that. As I said, it just can't be a collective handing a kid $3 million because that's what you got to do to get into your school. I don't like that. If you want to really stop that, then what you could do is you could say, okay, we're going to, deals can't be tied to who, where a kid goes to school. So meaning you can't say, well, hey, we're going to pay you this money as long as you're at such and such school. There's a lot of things you can do, but I don't like the idea of a cap on NIL money. I also don't like a strict one-time transfer policy rule, and there be no further explanation. As you all know, I would like to go back to the old transfer policy with some enhancements. But if you're going to do the one-time transfer rule, that's fine. However, there need to be some stipulations in place that I don't believe were in President Trump's executive order. Here's a couple stipulations that I would have. 3, actually. Number 1, every scholarship offer, that a player signs, every NLI, National Letter of Intent, should have specific language in it that says what that player was promised by the school. X number of dollars, a jersey number, a dorm room, playing time, whatever a kid is promised by the school, they need to put into the contract. If the school violates those things, then the player should be able to leave and transfer after the season, right? I signed a contract. Part of that contract was you were going to give me these perks. I was going to get to wear the number 3. I was going to get, promised playing time. I was going to get to stay in this dorm. I was going to get X number of dollars. If in the end of the year you don't meet those needs, then I can get out of this contract. It's no different. And players should have to live up to their end of the bargain too. You're going to go to class, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, you're going to do these other things. And if you don't live up to it, then we don't have to pay you, right? So there should be some exemptions to protect players from these quote unquote contracts that are, in my opinion, in a lot of instances, predatory contracts. Number 1. Number 2, if a school fires a coach, then every player should be allowed to immediately enter the portal once the portal opens. That should be allowed. No stipulations, no 15-day wait, nothing. If you choose to fire a head football coach, that is a choice that you as an institution has made. You are the initiator of the breach, essentially, of this, correct? The institution is. I therefore have no desire to protect the institution from the transfer portal if they decide to fire a coach. Number 2. Number 3, if a coach decides to leave on his own, there should be what we have now, which is a waiting period of X number of days. I believe it's 15 days, Trev, once a new coach is hired, where that new coach can meet with players and talk with players and try to get them to say, hey, we're going to stick with you or not. That gives that coach an opportunity to kind of keep everybody there as best as possible. Once that window's passed, then players can jump in the portal, whether they have transferred before in the past or not. Because here's the deal. Players and coaches are not the same. As much as, I despise Jay Billis, but as much as people like Jay Billis want to try to pretend that players and coaches are the same and use the same lame, tired, lazy logic of, well, if coaches can leave, why can't players? Because they're not. Because coaches can also be fired 3 games into a season. Do we want to create a world in which players can be fired 3 games into a season? I don't think that we do. Having said that, if coaches can have freedom of movement, then players should not be tied to that school because they agreed to it. You don't commit to a school, your coach commit to a school. That's fine, but that's false. It should be both. You're committing to a school and you're committing to a coach. Because if I agree to go play at the University of Notre Dame for Marcus Freeman and Marcus Freeman leaves and they replace him with Brian Kelly, I don't want to play for that clown. Yes, I love Notre Dame, but I don't want to play for that clown. I shouldn't have to be tied to this because I chose to come play for Marcus Freeman. Now, if Marcus Freeman left on his own, there should be a time period where Brian Kelly gets to sit down and talk to me and explain to me his vision for the program and lie to my face and do all these type of things. And then I can choose after 15 days to say, peace out, I'm not going to play for you. Or, you know what, coach, I believe in your BS, and so I'm going to choose to stay and play for you. I'm sorry, I should stop using Brian Kelly as an example. It's a very terrible example, but you get the point that I'm making, right? And the reason it's different for me is because if the head coach leaves, and yes, it is just the head coach, because players should not be leaving because an assistant coach leaves or a strength coach leaves or some other nonsense. It's the head football coach. That's the person ultimately that you're choosing to play for, because there's way less turnover from a head coaching standpoint than there is from a position coach standpoint. But here's the deal. If the coach leaves, then the institution didn't initiate that process. There should be some protections for the institution from getting raided before they get a new coach in there, right? But at the end of the day, those players still have the opportunity to leave if a coach leaves. It simply prolongs that process a little bit, which allows them, the school, to say, hey, we want to protect ourselves a little bit. But if you fire a coach, there is no protection for you because you initiated it. If you don't have those exceptions in there for transfers, then I'm going to have a hard time accepting it if we're going to have any kind of one-time transfer at all. And that's why I don't accept. I think that all that Trump is trying to do, in my opinion, is lay a foundation, a groundwork for, okay, now let's negotiate this stuff and let's get a deal, right? I mean, that's the name of his book, right? The Art of the Deal. That's all this is. Let's make an offer and we can try to get this ball rolling. I don't think he had any intention of this is going to be the new rules and everybody's going to have to accept it. As now, some people like him. They want to act like, oh, this is brilliant. Some people don't like him. Oh, it's so stupid. If you're an intellectually honest person, I don't care what you think about him or not, you have to understand this is what he does. He's going to make this proposal because he's trying to get the ball rolling to get to the ultimate deal. And so those are some things I have with it. I think there's a foundation there that I accept. We need to get collectives out of this. Simple as that. And we need to have a process where no, and he doesn't want it his way or no way. That in no way, shape, form, or fashion reflects in the entire history of Donald Trump when it comes to deal making. That's absolutely just patently false. I'm sorry, Michael. That's just absolutely false. But the reality is this, Trev, you have to have protections for players. You also have to protections for institutions. And not enough people are willing to say, I believe that we have to protect both sides. And clowns like Jay Billis just want to act like they just want to virtue signal, oh, I'm so wonderful, I'm pro player. You're not pro player. You're not pro player at all. You think you are in your virtue signaling, but you're not pro player at all. There has to be some level of, we're going to protect the players, but we also need to make sure we protect the institutions from things that are outside of their control. But like I said, if you're the one initiating a coaching firing, then okay, here's the risk. And then now what does that do? That also protects coaches. You better be really certain that you want to make this move, because if you make this move and you initiate the firing, understand that you could end up losing your entire roster. You know what I mean? And so those are things that you look at it and say, this is why I can't support this, what he said in this regard. Although I think there's some principles, hey, we can work with this, that hopefully both sides will be able to work with. My concern with him getting involved is this, Trev. The reality is this. We are in a political climate right now where once he puts his hands on something, people don't want to touch it because they don't want in any way, shape, form, or fashion give him a win or in any way work with him at all. That's the sad reality of the situation. Now, here's the deal. If it was a D in the presidency, the R's would be doing the same crap to him. That's the political climate we're in. And that's why I kind of wished he would have stayed out of it, because then people that might have been, prone to this are now just going to intentionally resist it just because now he put his stamp on it. And that's an unfortunate thing. But at the end of the day, until Congress steps in and really lays down some things, this is just not going to get fixed.
Yeah, we share a lot of the same thoughts about this. I mean, a major step in the right direction. I mean, I think it's a step in the right direction. We can get into a debate over word choice here, but I think there absolutely has to be caveats to the one-time transfer rule, and a lot of the things that you laid out, I definitely agree with in its entirety. And I also don't think there should be a cap on NIL. I've used the analogy of, rev share and NIL it's almost a mirrored equivalent of base salary and commissions working a sales job.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I personally would not go work with at a company that would cap my commission.
Right.
So if that's going to be the confines of what these players are playing under, I wouldn't want to have my earning ability cap, because the reality of the situation is, look, I mean, Jeremiah Love deserved to make more money than any running back on Notre Dame's roster last year. We can have that
Sure.
conversation. Now, that doesn't mean that Jadarian Price was a bad player and Aeneas Williams didn't mean anything, but that's just how that works. And it's even outside of local car companies. Because I'm with it. Like if GMC or Gurley Leap wants to sign CJ Carr to a contract, sure,
Right.
absolutely. But if State Farm wants to do that,
Right.
if Geico wants to do
I'm
that,
simply
absolutely.
making like one example of it,
Yeah.
right? You can talk. I mean, and he can get deals from Gatorade, and I don't care. I mean, all of that stuff is fair game. If they view him as someone they want to market as a face of their product, either locally or nationally, then good for them. God bless
Yeah.
America. And this idea that, and I understand where it comes from, because here's the problem: when you're going through collectives, you're constantly year after year hitting up a small amount of donors, and that bloats the price. And that's not sustainable. It isn't. And so I think a true NIL compensation package will actually lower the amount that people are making now. It will, because it isn't sustainable. What we're seeing right now is, in my opinion, not sustainable. But those are all aspects of it, Trev, that have to your point, that have to be addressed. This notion that we're going to cap what a player can earn, why? Shouldn't the market put the cap on it? And that's my hope. I think that's where you and I are in agreement, Trev, is get a fair, true NIL system that's not just this crazy collective pay for play thing. And the market will take care of itself, because the reality is we can't all pay. I can't pay this amount of money every year for 15 recruits. You know what I mean? Like, my business doesn't do that well. And it creates more of a true NIL compensation package. And that's the reality. And that will naturally, it won't put a cap on it. It won't be an arbitrary cap. It'll lessen the amount that's being flowing into the sport right now, but it won't be a cap, because a kid can still theoretically make money if somebody's willing to pay it. And it's a and again, boosters can still do it. If you run a business and you want to have CJ Carr do an advertisement for you, or some meet and greet, or whatever the case may be, there just has to be a minimum. There needs to be a standard minimum of what you have to be asked to do. That's my thing. You have to, minimum standard is you have to do 3 appearances and this and that. That there just has to be something. And if players don't show up, then they are in violation, whether the business wants to, hammer them out or not. Because like Nico Iamaleava, whatever his name is, had stipulations. He had to do certain things, and he just wouldn't show up, and they wouldn't do anything about it because they ultimately didn't care. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Great way to start, by the way, Salty. It's a great start.
Yeah, absolutely. From B-Jam and 41, the transfer portal has been a mostly positive aspect of college football, especially for Notre Dame, for many reasons, and players shouldn't have many restrictions if they want to transfer.
I very much disagree with this. I think the problem that I have with this sentiment is you are looking at this as a fan of an athlete, not a fan of a young man. And I don't mean this with disrespect at all. And as a fan of the sport. So people say, well, isn't it a great story that of what's happened in Indiana? Yeah, it's a great story. Most of what happened in Indiana would not be stopped by the rule changes that we've proposed. Every single kid that came with Curt Cignetti in his initial push from JMU, I believe would have been first-time transfers. I believe Fernando Mendoza was a graduate. Curtis Rourke certainly was. Pat Coogan was. Josh Burnham will be. You know, there's no rule that says kids can't transfer. Nobody's really fighting for the old rule as much as I like the old rule. Well, I shouldn't say the I don't like the old rule. There was a lot of problems with it, but I like the notion of sitting out. I'm more open to some circumstances where it's okay now. But I'm telling you that the reality is this whole notion of players can just transfer year after year after year. You're basically just admitting, I don't care if they get an education or not. I don't, as long as they play football and good basketball. I don't care if they're getting college degrees. I don't. I just want there to be good football and good basketball. That's essentially what you're saying without saying, and you may not think you're saying that, but you are. When a kid transfers every year for 4 years or 3 out of 4 years, it's impossible for him to have any continuity when it comes to a really legitimate quality education for a host of reasons. And that is why, look, you can say all you want, this is pro sports. It shouldn't be pro sports. And I'm so sick of Jay Billis and his bull crap about this is pro sports. It's not pro sports. These aren't grown men. They're young, developing people. I call them kids, but they're young, developing men. They're people that are in the final important stages of development before they go out into the real world. And people like Jay Billis want to just completely destroy the opportunities that he had as someone who got a free education at Duke, who went on to become a lawyer. What's funny is this moron is trying to destroy the very system that created a world in which anyone even knows who the freaking heck he is. His ability to play college basketball in the 1980s at Duke, his ability to get a free education and a great education at one institution, and ability to go on and become a lawyer. He wants to remove that now because why? He wants to get people more money. He's full of crap. He's nothing more than a virtue signaling clown that can't see past his nose to realize what the system he wants is going to do to the development of young people. And it is impossible to have any continuity from a big picture standpoint to have people develop the way they need to be developed from an educational standpoint, from an interpersonal relationship standpoint, from a community standpoint, from a ability to handle adversity standpoint. When you're going about allowing players to just leave year after year after year, you are not doing right by them. And this notion that we should just allow them to do whatevs because it makes me feel good about myself to be pro player is kind of disgusts me. When in reality, what you're doing is you're basically removing the opportunity from a lot of these young men and women to have the opportunity that you had that has put you on this platform that you're currently abusing. That's my issue with Jay Billis. He's an absolute fraud, in my opinion. I can't stand the guy. I can't stand you virtue signalers. I can't stand him. And that's exactly what he is. But at the end of the day, we as the grown-ups should say, we're going to fight for players and student athletes because they should be student athletes. And part of fighting for them is saying, we are in a billion-dollar industry. This is where Jay Billis is correct. The old idea of amateurism should die, but we shouldn't replace it with just making them employees. You're taking one crap system and replacing with an even crappier system. Because the reality is the vast majority of these student athletes are not going to make millions of dollars in NIL deals. They're not going to go play professional sports. The one thing that we could get to these young people is we could say, but the ones who weren't, we were developing them as young men and young women. They were getting great educations in certain places, not all places. They certainly were at Notre Dame. They certainly were at Duke. They certainly were at other schools, right? We're taking that away and we're saying that doesn't mean anything anymore. And that's the sad part. And that's why I say there are things we can fight for players for what's right for players, because sometimes they don't know what's best for them. All of us had that, Trev. I would think you look back at decisions you made when you were 18, 19, and 20 and say, I wish I would have had someone that would have told me this, or boy, am I glad my dad was there to make sure I didn't do this. I have both of those examples. And the people that have lived it need to be able to look and say, hey, look, the system before was broken and it needed to be fixed. This ain't fixing it. Let's create a more realistic idea of amateurism that allows players to get a piece of $1 billion pie, while also saying we're not going to throw out the notion of student athlete out the window. And in fact, we're going to defend it even more than we did under the previous corrupt institution. That's what we should be fighting for. And part of that is saying you can't get a quality education when you're constantly transferring year after year after year. Well, normal students do it. Not really, because most normal students transfer once and then drop out of school. But also, these aren't normal students. Stop using the whole, well, this and that. These aren't normal students. They're not. And we need to do more as a nation, as a group of fans, to say we're gonna fight for their right to get a piece of the pie, but we're also going to fight to prevent them from being exploited. Because what bothers me about people like Jay Billis is, if you think players are getting exploited before, it's way worse now. Way worse now. And this notion that, oh, but they're getting paid. So money's finite. It can go away. Decisions by leaders in our country can make your dollar mean a whole lot more or a whole lot less. And they can just take it away. And if you choose not to give some of it to them, you go to jail. That's not what it's like. The old expression got, Trev. You teach someone to fish, right? You give someone a fish, they have dinner, right? If you teach them how to fish, they have dinner for the rest of their lives, right? And we're in a world now where we're just giving these kids, hey, here's dollars, and we're refusing to take this tough stances because I don't want to be considered not pro player, because then I won't get virtual signaling, and all my cool elitist friends won't think I'm the man anymore. So I've got to fight for this thing. This is bullcrap, right? Like, we need to be able to say, hey, this is what we need. This is the system we need. We need to make sure they're getting a piece of the pie, but we better darn well sure demand that while they're here, we're doing the things necessary to make sure that we're truly developing these young people on and off the court, on and off the field. Because right now it's just, here's a bunch of money, let's go play basketball. Here's a bunch of money, let's go play football. Life's, you don't like where you're on the depth chart, don't worry about fighting harder this offseason. Just go transfer somewhere else where it's easier. And people actually want that. So I strongly disagree, and I sell the heck out of this sentiment right here by B. Jamin.
Yeah, I sell it as well. I mean, look, we're working with it under the notion, per the submission, that every school handles a transfer portal like what Notre Dame does. And that's just not the facts. Like, there are some schools that I believe do it the right way. Notre Dame does. Ohio State does it the right way. Indiana did it the right way. But we can't look at what Indiana did and say that that's just how everybody should manage the portal. That is a very different situation than what LSU did this past offseason to rebuild through the portal. It's very different than what Texas Tech did to rebuild through the portal. It's not all the same. So I would understand if every team was working under the same standard for the transfer portal, but it's not. It just isn't. So I'm with you, Brian. I'm selling that one as well. How about this one? The NIL and pay for play has been mostly a negative aspect of college football. It needs to be regulated and tweaked.
I want to again separate. I'm gonna buy this, but I think again we need to make sure that we're, just because they call it NIL doesn't make it NIL. NIL is now this broad term that includes a lot of things that aren't NIL. Name, image, likeness. That's not what just giving a kid X amount of dollars is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's not what it is. So NIL is fine. Pay for play is the problem, and that needs to be regulated and tweaked.
Yeah, I mean, it's like with a lot of the other hot topics. It's the transfer portal, it's the pay for play, it's the how you're acquiring funds from NIL. That stuff needs to be regulated. I'm with you. But big picture, be jamming from where you're coming from. I buy this because I do think it needs to be regulated and tweaked. But to Brian's point, it needs to be separate, the pay for play and NIL terms.
I also want to push back on this notion that players should just be grateful they're getting a free education. And the reality is that that's absolutely bonkers to me. Because if you're a kid from Ohio and you're going to school at Ohio State, Trev, you're an Indiana kid. How much does it cost for an in-state kid to go to an in-state school like IU or a school like that, right? Like,
it varies, but I mean around like 20,000.
all right. So you're paying $20,000 a year. Okay. I think there's value to that. I despise people that are like, oh, free education is not, scholarship has no meaning. Bullcrap. Because those same people, if you said, okay, cool, then we're going to do a rev share, but the players now have to pay for their school room and board and all that with their rev share money. Would people be okay with that? No, they wouldn't. They'd be howling because there is value to that. But creating that as that's enough in this era also misses the mark, in my opinion, because that was absolutely a very fair, righteous thing to provide before the Supreme Court case of 1984, which we have laid out multiple times in the show. Because once that floodgates opened up and this became a billion-dollar industry, free room and board was not enough. Free tuition was not enough. But we should not dismiss that. The problem is, I don't really care about a free tuition if you're not demanding that student athletes actually take advantage of that free education. And that's the problem. But they shouldn't just be grateful that they're getting that. Like, I'm sorry, because they're not getting anything out of it in a lot of cases. And that's a big issue that I have with this. Free room and board is not enough. And a little bit of no, they shouldn't be grateful for that. They should be appreciative to a degree, sure, understanding that there's also some expectations on their side of the equation, but it shouldn't just be enough, in my opinion. And you watch the Final Four and you watch all the things and the banners. Why shouldn't a player be able to, you know what I mean, to cash in on that? Why shouldn't they be able to cash in on that? They should be able to cash in on that, but not at the expense of what we're giving up on the opposite end. That's the whole problem, Trev. There's too many people on one side of this argument, and they're unwilling to budge and see where the other side is coming from. Yes, there should be value in a free education. And yes, there should be value in not having to take out loans. Because what are all the students that are working full-time in college, what are they usually working for? To pay off their room and board, their tuition, right? That's why a lot of them work. Not all, but that's a big part of it. But at the same time, also be able to look and say, do you know the hundreds of millions of dollars that were generated from the college football playoffs? And you're telling me they deserve nothing except some free gear? Like we're missing the boat on this. And because we've put ourselves on these opposite ends of this debate, and we're unwilling to see, this side has some things that they're right about. This side had some things that we're right about. Let's try to figure out what's best for the entire system. Players included, coaches included, schools included, all of it. And just like with a lot of other things, we become way too tribal with this argument. People that despise the current version of NIL want to resort back to the way things used to be. I don't want to resort back to the way things used to be, because the way things that used to be got us here in the first freaking place.
Agreed. I think the other big part of this argument too is agree with everything that you're saying, but it's also the day-to-day in the life of a college student. Like my best friend, the best man at my wedding, had a full ride scholarship to go play at the University of Indianapolis. He was an offensive lineman. One of my other best friends, she had the Lilly scholarship where she got free tuition anywhere in the state. But their day-to-day lives were very different. So like for some people, they just assume that, for football players in college, it's like just what you did in high school. Like you just had practice after class and then you're done and then you play games on Saturdays. That's just not the case. Like him and I lived together for 4 years in college. I was watching him get up at 4:30 in the morning to make it to a 5 a.m. run, then go to a lifting session afterwards, and then go to class so then he could study enough for the bar exam and do all the things he needed to do to get into grad school. Like it's all of that on top of playing football. It's like a second job. So it's not just you got free tuition. It's like, well, I watched one of my other best friends get free tuition, and her weekends and her nights looked a heck of a lot different than what somebody playing football. And that's at the D2 level, not to diminish anybody who isn't playing at Ohio State or Notre Dame. But I can only imagine what that's like. UIndy didn't have nutritionists. We all ate in the same cafeteria. Like imagine being a schedule so regimented that's like, well, you should just be grateful with free tuition. It's like, it's a whole other job, man. It's just a completely different world.
I also think that people need to be very leery of those trying to tell you that graduation rates are up. Because all that graduation tells you is, does a guy get a piece of paper at the end? And a lot of people for years have finagled graduation rates to make it look like they're educating young people. I've met a lot of graduates that are morons. I've met a lot of college graduates who can't think their way out of a wet paper bag because they weren't given a proper education. It's not about getting a piece of paper. It's about getting an education. It's about being developed. And the only reason that this is better is because more players are staying for 4 years and 5 years that would have gone pro otherwise. That is a good thing. It's a good thing for the game. I don't think it's bad that teams like Michigan and UConn that are very veteran basketball teams, or in the instance of like UCLA women's team, very veteran basketball team. In a men's world, I don't know that Yaxel Lendenberg would have stayed in college if it wasn't for NIL. That's a good thing. But it doesn't mean that, and I don't know him particular, but it doesn't mean that he was necessarily given an education. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. I'm making the point that just because a guy is getting a quote-unquote degree doesn't mean anything, because these schools are clearly finagling, not finagling in a bad way. They can do whatever they want. Your admissions department can choose whatever standards they want. But there's no way that these kids are going to 4 or 5 schools in 4 or 5 years, and that there's any kind of continuity towards getting an education the way that a student who basically maybe goes to 1 or 2 colleges is going to get. So just because you're getting a diploma, just because they're saying, oh, he graduated, doesn't mean these schools give a rip about actually educating young people. As Michael Cannon just pointed out, there was a lot of basketball players at North Carolina that graduated taking fake classes. Right? They graduated. Did they get an education? No. And I don't care about being graduating. I care about if a player's in college for 2 years. Let's say he's an future NBA player, and he stays in college for 2 years. Let's use Chris Webber as an example, right? When he was at Michigan back in the day. Why should Chris Webber be on a normal track as a normal student? I got to take 2 years of gen eds and stuff like that when I'm an elite basketball player. We always create these academic tracks for students to pursue things to go vocationally be successful. Why is there so much resistance to a track that is geared towards athletes? Here's what I mean by that, Trev. In 2 years of being at Michigan, Chris Webber takes a bunch of classes that are geared towards business ethics, economics, finance, marketing, things that are going to help him be successful taking care of his money and his brand when he goes to the NBA. Why isn't there a track? And then demand that he take that education seriously. Because you can't demand that they take an education seriously when you're not actually letting them take classes that are going to be beneficial to them to be successful when they go on to the rest of their lives. You see what I'm saying? Like if Trev, you go to school, what'd you major in?
I was marketing for a while.
Okay. And that kind of is the direction you went initially with your career. But it's even, you can use things from that degree with what we do here at Irish Breakdown, right? There's going to be classes that you took. There's things that you learned that are going to say, okay, but the whole point is, even if you choose to go a different route, the degree was geared towards training you to do a certain thing or certain types of things once you graduated, right? To better you, to prepare you to be vocationally successful in life. Why can't we do that for a guy that we know is only going to be in college for a year or two and have a track that's specific? But we always had this fake idea of amateurism. It's like, no, you've got to be on a normal class. So you've got to take poetry and you've got to take a science. And that should have already been taught to them in high school. These things should be, okay, we're going to teach you these, and these, so you can go be successful with what you want to do in life. And then if that player ends up staying 4 years, there's a track that allows him to go graduate and be prepared to go be successful in certain things. And that's kind of my issue, Trev, is with it, as well as we need to be doing more to say we are going to treat them as students, but we make every student that wants to be a teacher, we have a track for. Every student that wants to be a doctor, we have a track for. Every student that wants to get into, art we have a track. Everybody wants to get into engineering. We have a track for it. Why don't we have a track for people that want to get into professional sports, either as a player, a coach, an agent? Why is that such this taboo thing that that's not staying true to the educational. Yes, it is. You're creating a track that allows a 5-star basketball player to come to Notre Dame knowing he's only going to be here for 2 years and get a phenomenal education that when he leaves in 2 years, he's being prepared. And part of that degree program is looking at, like, okay, this is who you're going to hire to do this for you. Here's some business ethics classes and some questions you should be asking to make sure this person isn't there for you. And then you'd have some professors that student athlete be able to sit down and meet with and say, hey, here's what my agent's asking of me. What do you think? Well, let me talk you through what this is. You know what I mean? Why are we so resistant to that? So again, if we're serious about this, those are the conversations we would be having, not the bullcrap conversations that we are having. And then people throw out there, well, he graduated. So what? What does that tell you? It doesn't tell you anything. It just tells you he completed a certain number of courses. It doesn't tell you about the quality of it. It doesn't tell you how well they did. It doesn't tell you what they're prepared to go on. Trev, you and I both know this. We were in college. There are classes that we didn't give a rip about. We did what we needed to do to study to pass the test. No retention of that information afterwards. Got the grade, passed the class. Doesn't mean I learned anything in there.
Definitely not wrong.
Because we're not going to get to like the 5th card. We keep on this note.
Another one from B-Jam, and it's a blessing in disguise that Kingston, Viliama, Asa, Drake Bone, and Aeneas Williams are recovering from injuries. It allows the coaches to concentrate more on the underclassmen and help them with their development.
I'm going to buy it from the standpoint of taking the question from the standpoint of what's best for the younger players. In that regard, absolutely buy it. I think this spring is going to be invaluable for Nolan James Jr. and Jonas Walton, for example. It's going to be invaluable for Jaden Osbury and Teddy Rizak and Thomas Davis Jr., guys who are getting a lot of this work. Completely agree. In the case of Kingston and Aeneas, I think they still would have benefited from going through spring practice. I don't know that there's anything that Drake could have got out of this.
Yeah, it's for those reasons that I'm selling it, because Drake's kind of the outlier. Kingston still could have benefited from having another full spring. Aeneas, absolutely, because he's kind of the heir apparent to Jeremiah Love and is going to step up seemingly into that number 1 running back role. The other injuries also kind of plagued that as well. Because if Madden Faramo was full go, I'd be more willing to talk about like Drake and Kingston being a blessing in disguise. And like we've talked about before, I think the experience for Jaden Osbury is going to be invaluable. But when it comes to the season, heck, even fall camp, he's not going to take reps at middle linebacker. It's more of that like tertiary impact that it's going to have with him, where it's like, hey, now he understands the full scope of the defense, and all that's extremely valuable. But it's just tough because those are some very impactful injuries. Same thing with Aeneas. Like if Kedron was healthy and good to go and Javian Osborne was, that'd be great. But Aeneas is seemingly stepping up into the number 1 running back position. So there are some benefits. So I don't want to sell it and say there's no possible good outcome of this. But I'm going to sell it overall. Then with the holiday weekend that's just passed us, we got a good candy one in here. Brian, buy, sell, hold your favorite Easter candy as a kid. Cadbury eggs, solid chocolate bunny, or Peeps?
This is an easy one for me. I'm going to buy Cadbury egg. I love Cadbury eggs. I'm going to hold the solid chocolate bunny. The only reason it doesn't get the top of the list is because it just was so rich. It's like you eat that whole thing, you're going to be sick. And I'm selling Peeps. I was so disappointed at Notre Dame the other day when they made those players eat Peeps. Like, why would you torture your players in that way? Like, what is wrong with you? You just basically put a bunch of sugar and gross additives into your players' bodies. I'm joking. I wasn't, whatever. I don't care. But Peeps are gross. I'm not a big marshmallow fan. The only thing I really love marshmallows in, Trev, is hot cocoa. I'll do a s'mores, but let's just say the marshmallow is not my favorite part of the s'mores. And it's messy. Peeps are gross. I've never liked Peeps. My favorite Easter candy, my mom would buy Rolos in a bag, and they'd be like the individually wrapped Rolos, and she'd put a bunch of those, and then cherry and apple jelly beans. Those are my 3 favorite Easter candies.
Nice. Yeah, I'm definitely selling Peeps. We have the exact same order. My go-to candy, especially around Easter, is more of like the fruity gummy type of candy, jelly beans, gummy worms, Skittles, all that type of stuff over but Cadbury eggs are delicious. So
Yes, still, sadly. It's my first Easter without having one. It was a sad time, Trev. Very sad time. But good. It's good.
Then some more from B-Jam. If you were the head coach of Notre Dame, you would allow at least 5 full open practices to the media in the spring.
Oh, I absolutely would. And not just because, just looking at it from a football coach. As a media person, of course I would pick that. But just looking at it from a football standpoint, you're in a situation, Trev, where you're trying to create a world in which they're used to the spotlight. You know, you're in this NIL era where name, image, and likeness and buzz and all this kind of stuff matters, and yet you're then preventing the local media from having any ability to kind of promote, talk about, hype up your players, have access to your players. I don't think that's a positive. Look, Notre Dame super strict on how much access they allowed us to have last spring and last fall, and they still went out and started 0-2. So we clearly weren't the reason you started 0-2. You know, so hey, you didn't let us do a whole lot, see a whole lot. You were super secretive about the quarterback this and the quarterback that and all these other, and you still started 0-2. So clearly there's no tie in here. Like, let us have more access, put restrictions on what we can and can't say. Hey, Driscoll, man, you can't go out there in your podcast and break down the coverage that we were running on third down. That doesn't help us at all. Please don't do that. All right, cool. And if I then get into the show and I explain to you guys, hey, here's the coverage that they are running, then guess what happens the next open practice? Sorry, Driscoll, you can't be here. You know what I mean? You got into these specific details of scheme and stuff like that you know that you can't do. So if I say Notre Dame ran inside zone, that's fine. But if I'm like, okay, so Notre Dame ran 12 personnel, right? So they lined up double wing here. Okay. And then they had 2 receivers. They motioned here, shifted the receiver across, and then ran inside zone because they were trying to do this, this, and this. Dude, that's not helpful. You know what I mean? Like, people don't need to see that. But I think there's a lot of advantages to players being around media more, players having to respond to media more, players having to know that, hey, how I go about my business today is being evaluated in preparation for a season where every single move you make is going to be evaluated, critiqued, and all those type of things. I absolutely think that there's merit to that. Do I think that Notre Dame has a right to tell people what they can and can't report on for practice? I do, because here's the reality, Trev. Being at practice is a privilege, not a right. We don't have a right to be at practice. As much as I want more access, we don't have a right to be there. This isn't like freedom of information thing. So they should be allowed to say, hey, you can be at practice, but you can't report on anything you see after the first 4 periods. Okay. And then if you break that rule, then, you know, you get a warning and the next time you lose access. So, okay, cool. You know, so I do think that there's a strong case to make that in today's era of NIL and spotlight, that there's merit to the players being under the spotlight more at practice. So, yes, I would open it up more.
I would too. And I've talked about this with Notre Dame before. You got to do one of 2 things. You either have to open it up to the outside media, or your own media team has to really start putting in the elbow grease to make sure that your players and your team are being like displayed for their fans to see. Because that's what it all ultimately comes down to. And that's what's upsetting.
Yeah,
you can't continue to limit, but you got to do one or the other. That's the biggest thing. Really is. How about this one? College basketball question. If UConn beats Michigan in the championship game tonight, Coach Hurley will be considered a top 5 NCAA basketball coach of all time. And I do want to say Michigan right now on FanDuel are 6.5-point favorites. They've scored over 90 points in like every game, I think, this year in the tournament. So
yes,
it'll be a tough task.
They have. The last time, so people act like this is like some amazing thing, and it is an amazing thing, but I just want to point out that that's not too far off what they did the last time they won the title. In 1988-89, Michigan scored on their way to the championship that year. Michigan scored in their first 4 or 5 games, 92, 91, 92, 102, and then 83. They scored 83 against Illinois in the Final Four. So it wasn't until the Final Four game that they didn't get to 90. So we have seen that, and that was a tremendous team with Glenn Rice, Lloyd Vaught, Terry Mills, Ramil Robinson, absolutely great team. But I don't know that I could put him in the best of all time, Trev. It certainly gets him in the conversation. Part of being an all-time great is not just getting hot in a period of time. It's kind of longevity. Does winning the title this year, this will be UConn's 3rd national title? or would it be his fourth? Let me look it up real quick. I think that'd be their third, right? Let me see real quick.
I think it might be his like third, but appearance in fourth or something.
So they won the title in 2023, 2024, made it to the round of 32 last year, and then this year they're back in the championship game. So that's a great run. Does that run make him better than John Wooden? Does it make him better than Mike Krzyzewski? Does it make him better than Roy Williams, Bob Knight? Does it even make him the best UConn coach of all time? Because so what he would do is you could say, well, okay, he has already matched Jim Calhoun's all-time record of championships because Jim Calhoun won 3, I believe, at UConn as well, I believe. The difference is Jim Calhoun's were spread out more of a period of time, but I would argue that Jim Calhoun had a much longer track record of success. Yes, he won 3 championships in his career, but he also made it to 4 Final Fours, won 7 Big East championships, 10 Big East regular. I mean, there's a longevity that goes on to it along with the national championships. I would also argue, and this is no disrespect to Dan Hurley, who's a phenomenal coach. It was a little bit harder back in the day when Jim Calhoun was trying to win the Big East then than what the Big East is now. Like, we can be honest about that. So and somebody in the chat just said, who said that? Andrew Gilmore. He's also building on the foundation that Jim Calhoun created at UConn when they were a nothing program. So it's a tremendous accomplishment, but is it better than what Dean Smith did over 30 years? Is it better than what Bobby Knight did at Indiana? Is it, you know what I mean? Like, that's where I just can't quite go with you. Does it make him a Hall of Famer as long as he didn't just fall off a cliff in the next couple of years? Sure. But being an all-time top 5 coach isn't just about number of championships. It's about doing it over a period of time. And he still isn't even there when it comes to the championships. He doesn't have as many championships as John Wooden. He doesn't have as many as Mike Krzyzewski, Adolph Rupp. And this championship would tie him with guys like Bob Knight, Roy Williams, Jim Calhoun. How many did Dean Smith win? I know he won at least 2. He won one with Jordan, and he won one in 93 when they beat the Fab Five. How many championships did Dean Smith have? So he won, let's see here. North Carolina won 2 national titles under Dean Smith, right? But how many Final Fours? How many Elite Eights? I mean, this is something like, look, I love this statistic. From 1981 to 1994, the year after they won the title, they made it to the Sweet 16 or deeper every single year. And they made it. They won 2 championships. See, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Elite Eights, another Final Four. Like, that to me still holds weight, even though you may have one more championship. That longevity means a lot, something to me. So no, he wouldn't be in my top 5, but I think he definitely cements himself as an all-time great.
Yeah, and I mean that per the submission too, BJ, and it just says NCAA basketball coaches. I'm sure you probably meant men's, but I mean, if we're talking just NCAA basketball coaches, Gino has his number, and Dan Hurley has a long way to catch up just to the UConn women's team. But I think I understood what you meant. But
yeah, I mean, if you want to talk just men's and women's, he'd be the 3rd best coach at UConn.
Yeah,
behind Jim Calhoun and Gino. Correct. I mean, the only coach on the same level as Gino is, John Wooden.
Yeah.
If you're gonna, you know what I mean, from that regard. But yeah, I took it as men's as well, Trev. Yeah.
And then the main thing CJ Carr needs to work on is his decision making when the pocket collapses.
No, I don't know if it's the main thing. I think there's 3 main things. I'll sell this. I think that's part of it. I think being able to throw with a little bit more consistent velocity is a big part of it. And then, of course, his timing still needs to improve. And I still think there's a level of the decision making when the pocket collapses is still a byproduct of, are you going through your progressions well enough to have a comfort level? I would say that is a byproduct of something else that needs to continue to be improved. But I fully expect it to be improved because it almost always does when a guy goes from one year to the next.
With you. Then another one here from Beat Jam, and you won't be surprised that by season's end, the two Ohio State wide receiver transfers are our best wide receivers.
I'll sell that. I'll be a little surprised if that's the case. If you were to say two of the best, I would buy that. But if they were like the one and the two, that would surprise me a little bit. And I think it continues to undersell how good the current guys on the roster are. And my surprise, Trev, in no way, shape, form, or fashion means I'm not as high on the Ohio State kids as other people are. I absolutely am. I think the issue is not people thinking too highly of the Ohio State transfers. I think people have the proper opinion of the Ohio State receivers. I don't think enough Notre Dame fans have a high enough opinion on the talent of the Notre Dame players that are already here. Jordan Faison. And look, I was a late comer to how good I was early on the train of Jordan Faison can play at Notre Dame. I was late on the train of Jordan Faison can be a difference maker at Notre Dame. Let's be honest. Like, I thought he could play for Notre Dame. I didn't think he could be their number one receiver and a guy that's going to go play in the National Football League. I did not see that. But guys like Jaden Greathouse also, Cam Williams, Micah Gilbert, Elijah Burst. There's a lot of talented NFL caliber players in this roster. And I would be surprised if in year one, both of them are at the top. If one of them is the leading receiver and the other one's like third or fourth, that won't surprise me. But if they're 1 and 2, that would surprise me.
Yeah, I'm selling that just because Jordan Faison alone. Yeah, I just don't see a world where this year, with the connection and the relationship that he has with CJ Carr, that he's not one of the two best receivers that Notre Dame has on the roster this year. And that's not a slight at anybody else on the roster either. It's just a talented group. And then you would rather Notre Dame play and beat USC in the playoffs than USC not come close to making the playoffs at all.
Sell. I want USC to bail on Notre Dame so that they can have either easier path to the playoff and still not make it. Like, that's the ultimate kind of FU to USC is you did all this to try to make your path easier and you still couldn't make it. So not only did you give up on the Notre Dame weekend payday, and believe me, the local community will feel it every other year when they replace Notre Dame with Fresno State, Sacramento State, or what other garbage team that they play compared to Notre Dame. Trust me, they're going to feel it. You sacrifice that and you still couldn't make the playoffs. That is the ultimate moral victory for Notre Dame. 100%.
Yeah, I'm selling it for the exact same reasons. I'm with you completely. Getting into the next part of the Buy So Hold today on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. We have double bogey like a champion getting us kicked off here. So Buy So Hold, Notre Dame will have 2 running backs and 2 wide receivers go over 800 yards total and 5 touchdowns each.
Sell. Are we number one? My sell is regular season. Regular season, I don't think they'll have 2 of both of those. I do think that they'll have the touchdown one. I actually agree with. It's the 800 yards that I'm not sure I'm on the same page with. That's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, and even if you factor in total yards for the running backs, like I think Aeneas will have close to 800 total yards. He'll probably have over 800 total yards in the regular season. It's that other running back of who makes up ground in the receiving yards game. That'll be a big impact. But now I'm selling this as well. Over the course of the season, I think it's a different conversation. But I'm with you.
I mean, it's not unheard of, Trev. I mean, we saw this. I mean, what's funny is the closest we've come to seeing this was actually 2022. Because we had 2 running backs over 800 yards, and then Michael Mayer was 800 yards receiving. The problem is there wasn't a second receiver that was anywhere close to it. You know, and since then Notre Dame hasn't had a single guy get to 700 yards receiving, period. So, and then they haven't had a second running back get to that number either. So, at least in the regular season. So I'll sell that.
Up next from Double Bogey, Buy Sell Hold, Christopher Burgess Jr. will solidify a rotation spot this season, leading to a huge 2027 season.
I'll buy that as a possibility. It wouldn't shock me. Look, Chris Burgess still has some ways to go to get there. He's a very talented player, but this is a very deep, talented group. So I buy that it's a possibility, Trev.
As do I. Then a Notre Dame defensive back will win the Jim Thorpe Award before the offensive line wins the Joe Moore Award. This one's interesting because there's the potential that it could happen this year for both. And we could be having a conversation of, okay, just which award comes out first? Is it the Jim Thorpe or the Joe Moore? But this is a really good submission because Leonard Moore absolutely could win the Jim Thorpe award. But this offensive line, if they continue to develop and be what we think that they're going to be, with Will Black at left tackle, Knapp at left guard, Ashton Craig comes back healthy at center, Sullivan Absher takes that next step at right guard, and then Gerby Lambert is what we've seen and what we believe him to be at right tackle. I could absolutely see that happening too. So I guess I don't really know which award comes out first. So that might dictate it. But I'll say this, Double Bogey. I buy that both the Notre Dame defensive back and the offensive line have the opportunity to win the Jim Thorpe and the Joe Moore award this year.
Here's the mistake you're making, Trevor Trowbridge.
Uh-oh.
You're using common sense and assuming that the Jim Thorpe Award actually goes to the best defensive back in college football.
That's a good point.
And while I love the fact that you use common sense, because that's what we should all use, when looking at the Joe Moore Award, it's often not the case that the best DB wins it. Now, the hope that I have is that the last 2 years, I do feel like it's gone to someone who could make a case to be the best DB. Caleb Downs this past year deserved to win the Jim Thorpe Award. He was a couple guys deserved it. He was one of. I don't think there's always only one guy that deserves an award. I think in 2024, for example, multiple guys deserve to win the Heisman. It can only go to one. Travis Hunter deserved it. Ashton Jeanty deserved it. And I would argue Cam Moore deserved it for his ability to put that team on his shoulders and turn them around. But you can only give it to one. And so my pick would have been Ashton Jeanty. So when I look at the Jim Thorpe Award the last 2 years, I think Xavier Watt should have won it in 2024. However, Jahdae Barron was also an elite player in 2024. So it's not like the year before they gave it to a safety from Air Force. And the year before that, a corner from TCU. And the year before that, the second best corner on Cincinnati's roster. So at least the last 2 years they've come closer. But I still don't have a lot of faith in the Jim Thorpe Award. I'm saying a lot of this sarcastically. I tend to agree with Trevor. I think this is actually a year where you could see them win both. And then it comes down to which one gets handed out first, which would be fun. I'll say this. If we're having that debate at the end of the year, this means this team is really, really, really good. I'm going to bring one up, Trev, because I want to get your opinion on this. Buy, so hold. One of the Big 12 or ACC will get two teams in the playoffs this season.
I think I'm actually going to buy this, and for a couple of different reasons. I like the two conferences that you picked, obviously, because I'm sure we're all confident that the Big 10 and the SEC are going to get at least two teams in. But the ACC, there's a couple of sleeper teams in there that might be able to make a run. And we've talked about some of them already. I think Miami is, I don't want to say a shoo-in for the playoffs, but even if they lose to Notre Dame, at worst, I think their record is 10-2. If they play Notre Dame close, they still have a shot. I mean, if they're 10-2 with one loss to Notre Dame, they're likely playing for the ACC title as it stands anyways. I think Clemson's another team to look at. I think Louisville, is this the year that they take the next jump over under Jeff Brom? Can they finally get over that hump? What does SMU do this year? So there's a lot of viable candidates in the ACC. And then the Big 12, I mean, on paper right now on April 6th, I think it comes down to BYU and Texas Tech. But last year at this time, I said I think it comes down to Arizona State and Kansas State. And we see how last season unfolded. So it would surprise me more out of the Big 12 because I think the ACC they've had two teams in the playoffs before, whereas I don't believe the Big 12 has yet. So I'm going to buy this. And I think my money would be on the ACC, but it wouldn't shock me if it was like a Texas Tech and a Houston or a BYU and a Houston this year. But that's where I'm at. I buy that one of those two conferences will get two teams in because I don't think you're going to have two G5s this year.
Agree. I would probably bet more money on the Big 12 this year, but I could see a world in which the ACC does it. You know, like Andrew Gilmore made a comment because the ACC doesn't deserve it with how bad the bottom half is. At least the Big 12 tries. I understand your point, but it just depends on what ACC teams are at the top. If say Clemson and Miami play each other in the ACC title, Miami loses a really close road game to Notre Dame, and LSU loses a really close. USC loses. Goodness, I'll get it right eventually. Clemson loses a really close game to LSU at the beginning, beat South Carolina at the end of the year. Those teams had good schedules that they had to manipulate to get to that point. I think they both have playoff resumes. I understand the argument of how bad the ACC is as a league. I don't disagree with that at all. But I still think, as we saw 2 years ago, there's a path for the ACC to get two. I mean, they've gotten two recently. The Big 12 is not. But I think the big key for the Big 12 is if you're BYU, either one of two things needs to happen for BYU, Trev. Number one is you need to beat Notre Dame. I mean, that would be huge for them. I guess one of three things could happen. I don't think they're going to beat Notre Dame, but the other thing is you don't play TCU, or Texas Tech, I mean, in the regular season. So one, you have to run the table in the regular season outside of Notre Dame, which means winning at TCU, means winning Arizona State at home, beating Utah on the road, and then lose a really, really close game to Texas Tech. That'll get you in. Or if you go 10-2, you lose Notre Dame and one other, you still get into the Big 12 title game, and then you beat an undefeated Texas Tech, and then you both get in that way. That's really going to be the pathway, short of them beating Notre Dame and going 11-1. I think that would get them in, because the one thing that they lacked this year in their loss to Texas Tech was they had, I mean, a lot of quality wins, but no wins that are like, oh my gosh, that's going to get you in, like A&M had with beating Notre Dame. And I think a win over Notre Dame would obviously help with that. But short of that, I think those are the two pathways for them getting in.
Yeah, makes sense. FanDuel just released their projected way too early conference championship winners, and it's a lot of the teams that we talked about in the ACC. Miami has the best odds at -135. Behind them is SMU at +700, Louisville at +900, and then Clemson at +1600. And then in the Big 12, it's Texas Tech at the top, -120. Utah and BYU are tied at +700, and then Houston's a pretty distant, call it third at +1800. But it'll be a close race. I'm very interested to see how that all pans out.
Same.
From D-Troll Hunter, Washington regresses in year 3 of Jedd Fisch and has a 7-win season.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Trev. I actually kind of buy this. I am not a huge Jedd Fisch fan. You know that. I think he's done some nice things. I think he's recruited relatively well. You talk about Damon Williams. I mean, he was a transfer from Arizona, but he decommitted from Arizona to go to Washington. Well, who was he committed to at Arizona? It's Jedd Fisch. I mean, he followed him there. But I look at this team, and they're very and D-Troll Hunter and I were talking about this afterwards, but they were a very undisciplined team. The fact that they're so good at home and so bad on the road is, to me, a sign of a team that's not coached overly well. I look at their schedule this year. They got to play at USC, at Purdue, at Nebraska, at Michigan State, at Oregon, but their home slate this year is going to be a lot tougher, in my opinion, than it was pre-2025, where they were winning a lot. I mean, you've got to play Iowa at home, which will be a tough game. You've got to play Penn State at home, and you've got to play Indiana at home. It's a lot like last year. And then last year they had 2 really tough home games, and what happened? They finally played some really, really good teams at home, and they get beat by both of them. And you did that with Denzel Boston, with Jonah Coleman, with some of the guys that are now off to the NFL. I'm not. And then you've got the drama of the Damon Williams situation and all that. I think they take a step back. I look at that schedule, Trev, and I see them losing at USC. I see them losing at Oregon. I see them losing at home to Indiana. That's a 3 guaranteed losses then between Iowa at home, at Nebraska, Penn State at home, at Michigan State, even a team like at Purdue, Trev, I don't think I think it's going to be a little bit of a tougher out this season than maybe they have in the past. And when I look at this team, they had to come back and beat Maryland on the road last year. They lost to Michigan on the road last year. They lost to a bad Wisconsin team on the road last year. The only good road wins they had were at Washington State, which is right down the street, and then at UCLA, which is a West Coast game. And so they haven't been a team that's looked great away from home, and that includes against some not very good teams. They lost to Rutgers 2 years ago, got blown out at Iowa, got blown out at Indiana, got blown out at Purdue, got blown out at Oregon the year before. They're terrible away from home, except when they play on the West Coast. So I don't think assuming they're not going to lose to Purdue is safe when we just watched them lose to Wisconsin and Maryland, almost losing to Maryland, and 2 years ago getting beat by Rutgers. I see that. I see them taking a step back.
Yeah, I do too. I'm buying this one as well. Isn't Washington under Jed Fish kind of just starting to feel like Dave Dorn at NC
Yeah.
State? It's like at home, you're going to do something like play Ohio State down to the wire and be super competitive, and then go on the road and lose to Wisconsin.
Yep.
Like you can't figure out how to be disciplined on the road, but you have good individual pieces of talent that on paper say that you should be better. I mean, that's kind of what Dave Dorn is right now at NC State.
100%. That's a
Um,
great comparison.
Thank you. It's the
Yes,
glasses today.
it is. You brought it.
I
And,
did.
and Trev's buy so hold glasses isn't even in the show today.
I know.
I'm very
worried for him.
disappointed. I'm disappointed in him. I'm going to let him know that too. Very disappointed. Hopefully he's okay.
But
yes.
I do buy this. I mean, the Big Ten has not been kind to Washington since they joined. They're 17-11 under 2 years with Jed Fish since they've joined the Big Ten, and with that schedule, I don't see it getting much better. So I'm buying that one as well. Sticking with the Big Ten, how about this one? Matt Rule makes the playoffs or is fired this year.
Sell. I don't think it's either or. I could see Matt Rule leading Nebraska to a 9-3 record, not making the playoffs and not getting fired. I think if he doesn't make the playoffs, there needs to be significant improvement though, Trev. I do agree with that. I don't think this is a situation where you're going to be able to like go 8-5, winning your bowl game, or going 8-4, losing your bowl game, and expect people to be happy. You look at their schedule, it's manageable, but also challenging. But the problem for him is it's challenging with teams that aren't necessarily blue bloods. You got Ohio at home, Bowling Green at home, North Dakota at home, and you're playing at Michigan State, home against Maryland. You should be 4-1, 5-0 at that point in time if you're truly turning things around. Then you got Indiana at home, which is not going to be easy, but winnable. At Oregon, home against Washington, at Illinois, at Rutgers, home against Ohio State, at Iowa. So it's like, let's just assume they lose to the three top teams they play. They get two of them at home. Let's say they pull off an upset and go 1-2 against those two teams. Now you've got to go 8-1 against everybody else, which means you have to beat everyone except for one of at Michigan State, home against Maryland, home against Washington, at Illinois, at Rutgers, at Iowa. That's going to be tough. That's assuming they pull off an upset over in Indiana, Oregon, or Ohio State. If you go 0-3 against them, I think the best you're going to be is 7-5. I mean, if you go 0-3 against them and you've still got at Michigan State, home against Maryland, home against Washington, at Illinois, at Rutgers, and at Iowa, I don't see 8-1 against that schedule or 9-0 against that schedule. So you're going to have to pull off a pretty big upset this year. I think they're capable of it. You're trying to do that with Anthony Calandria as your quarterback. That's just not going to go well. So I do think he could be in trouble this year, Trev. I just can't accept the premise of, without context, of he either makes the playoffs or he's fired. Because if they're 9-3 this year, there's a lot of good wins on that resume. There's even some really good wins if you're 8-4. I would need to see how the season goes, but I don't think it's a playoff or bust. He keeps his job. I think there needs to be 6, and you got to look like you've definitely improved. That's going to be the key.
Yeah, agreed. I've always been a little bit harsh on Nebraska, and I just don't think that they're a program right now that's in that state of it's playoffs or bust. I just don't think that that's them. I do think that there are some programs around college football that are kind of in that mode. I don't think Nebraska is one of them. With their drought, of beating ranked opponents, I don't think that it would even be a fair standard to say, hey, you've gone X amount of years without beating a ranked opponent. Now, if you don't make the playoffs this year with this schedule, we fire you. They had an out last year. If some of the Penn State rumors were true and they really wanted Matt Rule, and they extended him to kind of nix that. And so if you're going to extend somebody after having the season that you had last year, then if you don't make the playoffs this year, but to Brian's point, you go 8-4, 9-3, which is better than what you've done since you've gotten to Lincoln.
It's maybe your hardest schedule since you got to Lincoln.
Right.
Agree.
Got an interesting food one here, Brian. Walking and eating. Buy one, sell one, hold one. Cheeseburger, hot dog, pita, or shawarma? Pita or shawarma?
Hot dog is a buy. I'm someone who doesn't like a lot on a hot dog. I think depending on what you get on a hot dog, if you're someone who gets like mustard and relish and all this stuff on a hot dog, eating a hot dog and walking is not an easy thing to do. I eat plain hot dogs. That's a super easy thing to eat while you're walking. I'm also, cheeseburger would be my hold because, again, I eat lettuce and cheese on a cheeseburger, maybe bacon. That is something, and then also the way it is, you can hold it in a wrapping pretty easily. I would find a pita or a shawarma a little bit more challenging because I feel like, number one, I find those to be two-handed things to eat. A cheeseburger is not necessarily a two-handed meal to eat, at least not one you're going to walk with, right? We're not talking about like a big old burger from like a restaurant. We're talking more like a Whopper or something like that you're getting from a vendor somewhere, right? Those are a little bit easier to eat. I would think that a pita or a shawarma, that's more of a two-handed thing to eat for me, and that's a little harder to do when you're walking. So that's why I would sell that one.
Yeah, I think hot dog is the easy buy here. I'm going to hold pita and shawarma and then sell cheeseburgers just for the kind of cheeseburgers that I like to eat. I'm lettuce, tomato, onions, pickle,
Yeah.
mayonnaise, ketchup, mustard. Like that'd be real hard
That's
to eat on
messy.
the move.
Yeah. Yep. And that's going to be the thing because, like, for me, cheese, lettuce, and bacon, that's not that hard to do. Yeah. Yep. Same with a hot dog.
Yeah.
Like, what do you get on a hot dog, Trev?
I'll just do mustard.
All right. So you can make sure you're smart enough to not put it on the end of the hot dog or it leaks off. But yeah, I'm a plain hot dog guy. Now, if we're talking chili dogs, okay, I'm not walking and eating a chili
Sure.
dog, unless I have a bib.
And I don't know if any of us want to be walking around with a bib.
I ain't walking down the street with a bib on.
From grubbing up Heisman, Tennessee has been the most underperforming program this century. So really since the start of 2000, only major public school in the state. The private in-state school wasn't a threat, most of it, and in the middle of two talent-rich regions.
Oh man, I'm gonna sell that. No, I can't. No, I was gonna go in this century. So since 2000, man. There's a couple schools I was gonna go with, but I keep forgetting at the beginning of the century they had success. Texas, USC, Florida, Florida State. You know what? I'm gonna disagree with you. I'm gonna say Penn State. Because the thing about all the things you said about Tennessee are spot on. And I think Tennessee has underperformed. They were part of the reason the SEC East sucked for a while. But I look at a team like Penn State, and you say it's it's not the only major public school in the state. I get that. But it's still the prime public school in the state. It's not like Auburn, who's always playing second fiddle to Alabama. Like, they're number one. You're right in between Ohio, Jersey, Maryland is all right there to recruit from. Virginia's a hotbed to Penn State, always has been. And you've got, two Big Ten title game appearances in that stretch? Maybe. I think only two, correct? And no title game appearances. The furthest you've made is one semifinal appearance. I'd say Penn State has been a little bit more underperforming, but I will say this, grubbing up Heisman, I think Tennessee is absolutely in the conversation. Because here's where, if you're going to prove me wrong, here's where the argument you would make would be, Trev. Who's done a better job of putting guys in the NFL? And the answer to that is very clearly Penn State. And that's where you could do a bit of a trump card. I just say, I don't think Tennessee's the blue blood that people make them out to be. Penn State should be. So my standard for Penn State is higher than Tennessee.
That's fair. No, that's completely fair. Penn State's a great ad. I would debate Texas A&M. And I know that they're not the only public school in there, but I go back and think of they weren't able to take advantage regionally of when Texas was down. They had a Heisman Trophy winner, and in his returning season, I know there were a lot of factors at play. They couldn't even make a major bowl. They played in like the Chick-fil-A Bowl or something before. It was like the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. They had Jimbo Fisher, a very famous college coach that underperformed when he got there. They haven't been able to take advantage of mass recruiting in the area. And since 2014, they've made one playoff appearance, and they lost at home and scored 3 points. Like, the name for Texas A&M for the longest time has been underachieving. And I would argue them as well. Now, it's a little bit different when you also have schools like Baylor in the 20 teens was cranking out a lot of like top 20 programs, and Texas had their moments in between, 2000. Obviously, Texas won it all in 05, but I would argue about Texas A&M, but I think Penn State's a really solid add to that. I'd probably go Penn State over Tennessee too, honestly.
And I kind of feel the same way about Penn State and Texas A&M. It's like Texas A&M hasn't won a national title since like what, the 30s? And I think that was even one that they like added later.
Yeah.
Let me look it up. Like, it's all about, what is the expectation that you have for the program? And I look at Texas A&M and everything you just said is correct, but they'll never be the top dog in the state. Not necessarily from a football standpoint, but like there's years they've been better than Texas. Like I'm sorry, I was right. The last championship was 1939, and I believe that's one that they recently went back and claimed.
Mm-hmm.
But they're never going to be Texas, right? Like Tennessee's the top dog in the state of Tennessee, but the state of Tennessee still, even to this day, does not produce the kind of talent the state of Pennsylvania does, and especially the kind of talent the state of Texas does. So I think both of those teams, to me, would earn a little bit more merit over Tennessee. And the only reason I'd go with Penn State over A&M is, again, it comes down to the fact that they're always the number 2 team in the state.
Yep.
And you could argue outside of a couple years under Mac Brown, they've been better than Texas in a lot of years.
And you get into that blue blood conversation that you brought up as well that I agree with. It's like when I think of that, I think more of Penn State than I do Texas A&M or Tennessee. I'm with you there. Some more in here from Grubbing Up Heisman. Notre Dame has benefited more than any program from scholarship or roster rule changes.
That's a great question. So the scenario we have to ask ourselves is Notre Dame's recent success a byproduct of rule changes that have benefited the institution, or are they better now because they have a head coach who is maximizing the potential of the program in whatever era they're in? And the reason I would kind of lean towards selling it is because I don't think if you're going to talk about rule changes, scholarship and roster rule changes to me don't scream NIL. If you were to throw NIL in there, then maybe we'd be having a conversation because that has absolutely helped Notre Dame. But I don't think it would have helped Notre Dame much. I don't think Notre Dame is any different as a program right now than they were under the last 4 years under Brian Kelly if Brian Kelly stayed. I think they would have been in 22, 23, 24, 25, the same exact program. They might have even made one more playoff appearance than what Marcus Freeman made. But they never would have gone on the run that Marcus Freeman went on in 2024, and they wouldn't have some of the big wins that they have. They wouldn't be recruiting the way that Marcus Freeman is recruiting. So I don't know that it's necessarily the roster scholarship changes that has benefited Notre Dame as much as they have someone who's taking advantage at an elite level of the new rules of college football, which applied to everyone, and he would have done the same thing in an 85 scholarship era. That's where I don't agree. And somebody just said, I say yes, the admin's doing stuff they never would have done years ago. If Notre Dame didn't use the portal, 2024 would have been disappointing. Again, I disagree with that. Riley Leonard is not the only undergraduate transfer that Notre Dame got. Alohi Gilman was a guy that they got as an undergrad transfer. And Riley Leonard, again, could have graduated if he needed to at Duke to come to Notre Dame. So I don't agree with that. And I don't think, and who knows what other quarterback they would have got. So I think that the school is certainly doing things. There's no question. But would Brian Kelly have gotten out of Riley Leonard what Marcus Freeman did? Would that team have been as good as the one that they were in Marcus? Again, no, I don't think they would have. I think they'd probably go to the playoffs, maybe beat Indiana and get smacked by Georgia. So we'd be right back to where we are. So I don't agree. I think there's a lot of things. Well, the school never would have done this. You don't know that. But again, just because the rule is changing and they're taking advantage doesn't mean that somehow is why they're benefiting more than others, because that rule has also changed for everybody else. It's not a rule that apply like the rules in college football haven't stayed the same, but Notre Dame has changed rules of their own, and that's helping them. These are rules that apply to everyone. Who's to say Brian Kelly would have even gone after Riley Leonard? Who's to say Brian Kelly would have hired a coach that would have been successful to make him what he was? Who's to say that he would have hired Mike Denbrock at Notre Dame? He couldn't have brought Mike Denbrock. I don't think he could have brought Mike Denbrock back, a guy that he fired in 2016. So there's a whole lot of things you can point to and say, well, this wouldn't happen, that would have happened. You don't know that those things would have happened. You're making an argument that everything would have happened exactly the same had Brian Kelly been the head coach, meaning the recruits would have been the same, the roster would have been the same, this would have been, and I don't agree with that. And so I think what it really comes down to is, yes, the school is doing more to support Marcus Freeman, but they're supporting Marcus Freeman more because of the evidence they see in him that he will then go take advantage of the things that they give him to try to win. And that's where I think that the argument is for me is I think you're assuming that Brian Kelly would have had the same roster at Notre Dame that Marcus Freeman had in his third year had he stayed in new rules, and I don't agree with that.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. We see that very much the same. How about this one? Little NFL. Bullet Bob Sanders is a top 5 safety, if not for injuries. Like, are we talking all time grubbing up Heisman? Because that's so tough. I mean,
Yeah.
I'll buy that he had an opportunity to be in the conversation, but then when you start thinking about guys like Ed Reed and Troy Polamalu and Brian Dawkins and like Steve Atwater and Ronnie Lott, guys even before my time, like that's so hard for me to be like, yeah, Bob Sanders, if it wasn't for injury, because there's just a level of projection there that I'm comparing to. I saw what Troy Polamalu did.
Yeah.
I watched Cam Chancellor be a part of the Legion of Boom. I can go back and look at the track record of guys like Steve Atwater and Ronnie Lott. So it's tough. I buy that he could have been in the conversation, but I think for especially different eras, you got to start we have to start sorting people into the best of the 2000s, the best of the 2010s, the best of the 80s and the 90s, because just pointing to one just top 5 of just all time in the history of football is such a difficult conversation to have.
Yeah. And we don't know how his career would have gone if not for the injuries. We can all say that he was off to a great start. But really, the guy only played 2 years in the NFL, really. In his career, which spanned 8 years, I'm looking this up now, Trev, he only had 2 seasons where he played more than 6 games. Now, in those 2 years, he was first-team All-Pro both times. He was Defensive Player of the Year the second time. But what does that mean? And there's lots of guys that could claim those things. Kenny easily can claim that. He was Defensive Player of the Year in 1984. Guy from Virginia Beach, by the way. Went to the same high school that I went to my first 2 years. Would he have been – I would feel a lot better about top 10 than top 5. I mean, Harrison Smith is a guy that I would throw into that conversation, Trev, as being in there. Could he have been in the conversation? It was possible. I won't discount it. It's possible. But you're basically taking his 2 best years and saying, you know, it's like me saying if Terrell Davis doesn't get hurt, he would have been better than Barry Sanders. Maybe. You know, there was some evidence of it in a short period of time, but would he have been able to do it year after year after year after year for a long period of time, the way that Ed Reed did, the way that Ronnie Lott did, the way that some of those other all-time greats did? I don't know. Here's what I can say confidently. Bob Sanders, when he was healthy, was a tremendous player.
Yeah.
And that we can all agree on.
Yep.
It's just hard for me to take 2 seasons and project it out because we don't know. Maybe he would have slowed down sooner. Maybe his lack of size would have been more limiting the more teams got to see him play. There's so much to projection that we just really can't get into, but he was phenomenal. He was phenomenal.
From Father J-Pop, a team of Notre Dame's backups, which here means players behind the number 1 guy on the depth chart and without injuries, has an over-under of 8.5 wins against this year's schedule, and you would bet the over.
So here's what he has as the starting lineup. He has it as Blake Hebert at quarterback, any of the running backs, Kedron Young, Nolan James. Starting receiving corps, Micah Gilbert, Mylan Graham, Logan Saldate, Cam Williams, Elijah Burst, Bubba Frazier. Ian Premer, Ty Washington are the 2 tight ends because he counts both Flanagans as kind of 12 personnel starters. Your offensive line left to right would be Styles Prescott, Chris Terrett, Joe Otting, Devin Houston, Matty Augustine. Your defensive line would be Logan Thomas, Logan Thomas, Keon Keeley, Rodney Dunham, Ebenezer Toddy on the edge. Your interior would be Elijah Hughes, Tion Gray, Armel Mookum, Chris Burgess. Your linebackers would be Kingston, Villian Massa, Jalen Sneed. Your corners would be Mark Zachary, Jaden Sanders. Your nickel would be Dallas Golden. Your safeties would be Ethan Long and Luke Towers. Here's what I'd say. You would have a defense that could certainly win you 8.5 plus games. I'm selling this because I don't think you have an offense that could. I think the lack of certainty that I have in who your quarterback would be, combined with that's not an all-inspiring offensive line, is why I would say no, I can't go there. I think the receiving core, the running backs, the tight ends, the defense, all are capable of that. But I don't think you're beating Miami with that offense, with that quarterback and that entire offensive line. Could you beat Miami with one of those quarterbacks and the current offensive line? Yes. But I don't know if you can do that with an offensive line that has Styles Prescott and Matty Augustine at tackle and Chris Terrick, and you know what I mean? Like I don't because offensive line is a position where you don't just throw out a bunch of young guys. You know what I mean? And say, hey, we're gonna be okay. There's a level of experience required that they just don't have. There's some talent there. You could say maybe Grayson McHugh beats out Styles Prescott. You know, and so the talent would be okay, but just the lack of experience up front with that group would be problematic. I don't think you're beating Miami with that offensive line and that quarterback situation. I don't know that you're going on the road and beating BYU with that. Would it be competitive games both times? I believe so, because how good the defense would be and you'd have playmakers. But if we're being realistic, you have to sell this. Because if you're going to tell me that Notre Dame's backups would go 9-3, like, I can't go with you there. I mean, Miami's 0-1 roster, their backups don't go undefeated. You know what I mean? And that team had 8-9 guys in the two deep that were first-round draft picks. Notre Dame is loaded, but not so loaded that they're going to win 9+ games. Do I think they could go 8-4 with that? Yes, and that's actually impressive. Is it possible they go 9-3? It's possible, but it'd be tough. So I'm going to sell this.
It would be close. I buy that the over-under would be set at 8.5 wins. That I'm confident in saying, but I'm with you. I mean, look, I think if you take the over, I understand the excitement and I love the depth of talent. But here's the thing that you always talk about as a coach. You hate using the term potential because that means it hasn't turned into production yet. And especially on the offensive side of the ball, you'd be talking a lot about potential at the quarterback position, the running back position, in the trenches, at tight end, and honestly at receiver outside of Micah Gilbert, who caught the first touchdown pass of the year last year. And even him, the potential is still, can he make it through an entire 12-game regular season? I think if anybody takes the over, I could be wrong here. I think that's more of an indictment on Notre Dame's schedule than it is the talent on the roster. So I'm going to sell it, but I think it would be close. I don't think they go 6-6. I think they would be an 8-4 team with losses to BYU, SMU, Miami, and you'd probably have one early in the season, maybe to, just out of maturity, like the Michigan State game, or it's a rivalry game that's coming back.
Navy.
And, Navy, exactly. So that would be one.
Let me ask you this question, Trevor. Does your answer change if Kenny Minchie comes back? Mine does.
Mine changes, but I don't think it gets higher than. In short, yes, my answer
changes to the over. I think you go 9-3.
Yes.
I think you go 1-2 against your top three opponents, and then maybe have another upset somewhere. But I don't think you lose to all three. I think you could beat SMU with Kenny Minchie at quarterback, and that group of skill players, and that defense. It's the combination of the O-line and the quarterback inexperience that's my issue.
Yeah, for sure. I would take the over. I just wouldn't love that Notre Dame offensive line of how he formatted it versus Justin Scott and Ahmed Moten.
Right. Which is why I'm definitely not going 12-0 in a playoff team. But I think beyond those three teams, I think they're still better than everybody else on the schedule with a guy like Kenny at quarterback. Because Kenny can do some things, throwing and passing, that could that early potential upset you talked about. I think Kenny's enough to overcome that.
Yeah, absolutely. Another one from Father J. Pop. A team of Notre Dame's backups is more talented as a team than Freeman's first two teams and more than half of Kelly's teams at Notre Dame.
Big sell.
Yeah.
Big sell. His first, let me just remind you, let me just read off some names of guys that were on Kelly's first two teams. Zach Martin, Harrison Smith, Michael Floyd, Tyler Eifert, Sear Wood, Theo Riddick, TJ Jones, Chris Watt, Stephon Tuitt, Lewis Nix, Darius Fleming, Robert Blanton, Zeke Mata, Jamor Slaughter, Darren Walls, Trevor Robinson, Taylor Dever, Braxton Cave, like Capron Lewis Moore. That is a very talented group of players. Matthias Farley. Notre Dame's problem was not talent. I would argue that this team is deeper than any team Brian Kelly ever had. But I think when you start talking about taking away Notre Dame's best, you could even argue it's the most talented. It's more talented, including the starters. It's more talented than the 10-11 team. But you cannot tell me that a team of backups on the current roster is better than the team that has 2 future NFL Hall of Famers on it, Notre Dame's all-time leading receiver, a John Mackey Award winner tight end. Oh, and here's a name I forgot from the first 2 teams. I don't know, Manti Te'o? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how I forgot Manti. So, no, I don't agree with it. Like, we're in that excited time of the offseason, but let's not – again, Brian Kelly wasted a lot of talent. The backups of this year's team are not better than a team that had Quentin Nelson, Ronnie Stanley, Mike McGlinchey, Nick Martin, Steve Elmer, Will Fuller, CJ Prosise, Torrey Hunter, Amir Carlisle, Chris Brown, Jalen Smith, Sheldon Day, Kavari Russell, Max. You know what I mean? Like, I could go down this long list of talented players. Notre Dame's problem was never talent under Brian Kelly. The problem was, well, let me rephrase. The problem under Brian Kelly was not the talent of the people that put helmets on. It was the talent of the people that put headsets on. That was where they were lacking.
I can't follow that up. That was a bar. I can't follow that up at all.
That's why I pay myself the big bucks.
Fair. Very fair. From Father J-Pop, Marcus Freeman takes a place ahead of Dan Devine in Notre Dame football lore this season. Would be behind only Rockne, Leahy, Parsegian, and Holtz.
Well, I buy that because I am predicting Notre Dame will win a championship. So, yes, I would buy that.
As am I. Then Marcus Freeman takes a place ahead of Brian Kelly in Notre Dame football lore this season.
He's already done that.
Yeah. He did that after he beat Georgia. You could argue he did that after he beat Indiana.
100%.
I mean,
I'll give you the Georgia win because at the time, it's still Indiana. It's at home.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, it's not a top 4 team. Like, it's not Cincinnati from 2021 who's a top 4 team. I think that you nailed it with your initial comment, Trev. The minute they beat Georgia by 13, it was like, okay, done deal. And then if there was still any doubt in your mind, well, this Georgia team's not as good as this Georgia team, whatever. I would remind people, number one, that 2019 Georgia team lost to a 4-8 South Carolina team at home. But, hey, let's just give you that. All right, cool. The next week they went and beat Penn State in the Orange Bowl, which means in a week Marcus Freeman won as many New Year's Six games as Brian Kelly won in his entire career. Won 2 more than Brian Kelly won his entire career. So he's already moved past Brian Kelly. The only thing you could argue he needs to move ahead of Brian Kelly on would be all-time wins, and there's no way he's going to do that anytime soon. And I've said this a million times. I don't care about that. I don't care about all-time wins. That's a longevity award for a guy who should have been fired after 2016. You know what I mean? So I don't know that there are certainly some. I don't know that many people that would view Brian Kelly as being ahead of Marcus Freeman. I just don't.
No. I'm with you.
I certainly don't. But Marcus Freeman also has a 769 all-time win percentage at Notre Dame. Brian Kelly 739, so he's already well ahead. Actually, Marcus Freeman has a higher win percentage right now than Lou Holtz and Dan Devine had in their careers. So now he's closer to Brian and Kelly than he is like era. So there's a ways to go before he's with those guys, but he's close. Let's say Notre Dame goes, Trev. Let's say Notre Dame goes. If they, let me ask you this question: if they go 11-1 in the regular season, do you think they get a bye?
Yeah, it's kind of a cop-out answer. I think it depends on who they lose to, but by and large, yeah, I think they do. At like
okay,
4.
so you still think they get a bye? So that it just helps. So 15 games. So let's say that Notre Dame wins it all this year. They go 14-1. Then Marcus Freeman would be 54-13. They would have played, would it be 60? 667 games. So his win percentage would jump up to 806. And now he's creeping up on era. So, yeah, he would put some distance between himself and Brian Kelly, but I would argue, and Dan Devine, I would argue that right now he is better. And then also the other thing too is you look at Coach Holtz's prime years were still better than so far Marcus Freeman's prime years. And so obviously Coach Holtz's record was dragged down by taking over a really bad team that went 5-6 his first year, and then of course his last 3 years. But that stretch from 88 to 93, where they went 12-0, 12-1, 9-3, 10-3, 10-1-1, 11-1, is still, even if they win the title this year, still better than the stretch we've seen from Notre Dame in recent seasons. But it gets them a lot closer. But I would argue that Marcus Freeman is already he's done more in 4 years than Brian Kelly did in 11.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
From Joe Alt, super fan, buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame has the most depth of any team in 2026.
This I can buy. The backups are going to beat 9 teams on the schedule. That I can't go. If I'm being honest, I mean, if we want to have some fun and fanboy it and stuff like that, we could have some fun and say, oh yeah, they'll beat this team. But if we're being this, I would agree. I do think this is the deepest team in college football, because there's other teams that are similar, Oregon, Texas, Ohio State, but I would argue that Notre Dame doesn't have as many of the depth chart questions behind the starters that some of those teams do at just a couple spots. I don't know that I think that Notre Dame really has that outside of quarterback, but I think a lot of teams have that issue at quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Texas is in trouble if they lose Arch. I think Ohio State has a very talented 5-star kid, but are they good enough to just go run the table if Julian Sand goes down and Tavion St. Clair's got to take over? Maybe, maybe not. Like, it's at least a question mark. But I just think they have less of those questions.
Yeah, agreed completely. The 3 top teams that we've talked about in terms of winning a title is Notre Dame, Oregon, and Texas. All 3 would be in trouble if their starters were out. Like, and I understand that Oregon went out and got Dylan Raiola. I've watched him the last 2 seasons in college football. He's not Dante Moore. He's just not. I'm sorry. So I'm with you. I'm buying that one as well. Notre Dame is top 10 at every position, whether beginning of the season or midway through, with the biggest question being tight ends.
Yeah, I'd buy that. I think they're probably lowest at tight end. Running back would be second lowest, but yeah, I think they're top 5 at quarterback. I think they're top 5 on the O-line. I think they're top 5 in the linebacker, top 5 secondary. I think they're top 10 on D-line. I think they're top 10 at running back and tight end. If somebody was going to tell me I can't put the running backs there because there's not enough proven production, I wouldn't argue with you. That's fine. Like, okay, that's fair. Like, there's not as much proven production. Okay, that's fair. But if we start projecting what teams will be, I'm comfortable putting there, because you look, if we're being honest, right, in this conversation, you can't ignore the lack of production of running back and tight end when doing a national ranking. Now, we could argue, hey, they're talented, and that's all true. But when we were coming into the 2024 season, and we told everyone, this is a top 5 running back room. I know they haven't produced at this level, but they still had 2 guys that had run for decent yards the year before. And one of those 2 guys, the guy that actually hadn't run for the least amount of yards, was Jadarian Price, and he was a big-time kick returner the year before. So, like, there was still a level of, 385 yards from Jeremiah, 272 from Jadarian, and Jeremiah had shown himself as a little bit as a pass catcher. They'd played some meaningful downs. Jadarian, however, had the big kick return against USC. He was a very dynamic kick returner and all that. This group is like Aeneas did what he did, is almost exclusively backup minutes. Whereas one of Jeremiah's best games as a freshman was against Ohio State. It wasn't like he was just getting bench yards. So I would say that even then, that group was still more proven than what it is now. You can't just dismiss the lack of proven production when comparing yourself amongst the best in the game. If we're having an honest, fair conversation about it. So I would probably put them in the top 10 because of the talent, but I wouldn't sit here and debate with someone who would, if they had a list of 10, if you had 10 guys that had talent plus more proven production, okay, I'm with you. If all you're doing is giving me recruiting rankings and they don't have proven production, then I would say, okay, I don't accept that. But But overall, the premise, I would buy that, and I would still say I would argue that running back actually is the biggest question right now, just because of injuries. I mean, 3 of your 5 running backs are injured right now. At least a tight end, everybody's healthy presently. You say, well, Cooper Fana was hurt. Yeah, he was hurt, but Aeneas, Kedron, and Javion are hurt. And you could also argue that if we're projecting to the 2026 season, the most talented player between the 2 positions plays tight end. And that's Ian Premer.
And he's not even on campus yet.
Right. And you could argue that maybe the second most talented guy between those 2 positions is a tight end in James Flanagan. So I would actually argue running back is the bigger question mark. I'm not really concerned about either of them. I'm just saying if we're having to discuss it, that would be my answer, Trev. I got one for you, Trev. Buy so hold. We will finally see 2 backs in the backfield this season. This is Joe Waltz from Joe Waltz Superfan.
As much as I would love to buy this, I'm going to sell it just for the simple fact of, look, if we are not going to see it last year with Jay Love and Jadarian Price, 2 of the most dynamic playmakers that I've seen come through South Bend on any given year, I don't know if we're going to see it with Aeneas and Kedron, or Aeneas and Jonas, or Nolan James and Kedron Young. I mean, I understand the argument for it because you have a bunch of different running backs in the same room with a bunch of different skill sets. But if we're not going to see it last year, and with the receiving core as deep as what it is, and the tight end room being as deep as what it is, who do you take off the field to put on that second running back? So I'm going to sell it. Then another one from Joe Alt Superfan. Notre Dame's schedule will be far more respected by season's end. Still not a gauntlet by any means, but a schedule that will have only 3 teams just below 500 and 4 to 5 teams that end the season ranked or just outside the top 25.
I buy this, Trev. I think this is a point that you and I have made before, that Notre Dame's schedule is not a gauntlet. No honest Notre Dame fan can tell you this is a vintage Notre Dame schedule. This is like a pre-Jack Swarbrick schedule. You can't. Where, under Lou Holtz in the month of September, you're playing a ranked Michigan team, a ranked Michigan State team, a good Purdue team. You're playing Texas A&M. You're playing Miami, all within the first 5-6 games of the year. You can't tell me that the schedule's like that. You can't honestly tell me that. But I also don't accept the narrative that this is this cakewalk schedule. I reject both of those extremes. And I think, to his point, we are going to see some teams. I think you've talked a lot about Wisconsin, so we are going to see some teams that I think are better. Trev's talked a lot about Wisconsin being better this year. What does better mean? Does better mean 5-7, or does better mean 7-5? That's going to impact it. Purdue's going to be better. What does that mean? 4-8 or 7-5? You know what I mean? Like those are the questions. I think Michigan State's going to be better than they were last year. Does that mean 3-9 or 4-8, or does that mean 6-6, 7-5? Those are kind of the questions that we have. But I also agree with the premise that we will have 4 to 5 teams that are either ranked or just outside the top 25. There's already 3 that are going to be ranked in the preseason top 25. I mean, all except for 1 preseason top 25, and I'm talking like 9 or 10 that we've seen, have had 3 of Notre Dame's opponents in the top 25. Only 1 had 2. Miami, BYU, and SMU are consistently ranked in the top 25. Navy's been a borderline top 25 team each of the last 2 years. Then is someone like, does Syracuse bounce back and look like they did 2 years ago or not? Does Michigan State have a big first year under Pat Fitzgerald? Does Wisconsin have a bounce back year? Those are all questions, but there's 4 right there that I think will either be ranked or right outside the top 25. So I buy this.
Yeah, it's a buy for me as well. For the first time under Marcus Freeman, we're going to watch Notre Dame play their toughest opponents after the halfway point. They get BYU on October 18th. They get Navy on Halloween. They get Miami on November 7th, and they get SMU on Senior Day, which is by far the toughest Senior Day opponent that this team has faced in quite some time. And so that's one thing that I appreciate about the schedule. But yeah, this is, to Brian's point, this is what we've been trying to tell everybody. I have gotten into many debates about this with other people. Like, it's not a gauntlet, but it's also not what Penn State's playing this year. Mm-hmm. Like, let's also not pretend you can spin conference or you can spin schedules any way that you want to, but this is a decent Notre Dame schedule. It's not a gauntlet by any means, but it's definitely a tough stretch once you get to October 18th and then on through the end of the season. I'm very interested to see how it goes. I'm with you.
Yep.
And then Joe Alt will control, alt, delete every defense he faces in 2026 and will rightfully be crowned the NFL MVP.
Since I'm responding to someone named Joe Alt Superfan, I'll go ahead and buy this just to make him happy. Has an offensive lineman ever won MVP in the NFL?
I don't think so. No, I do not think so. I'll say this, Joe Alt Superfan, I just want to see him healthy.
That's right. There you go.
That's where I'm at. Getting into the next part of the Irish Breakdown podcast brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. We got the buy-sell hold going on today, and getting us kicked off here in part 3, we got Rudy wasn't offsides.
I'll go ahead and read these, Trev, because he's asking these from a gambling perspective, and you're better suited to answer those questions than I was. So we'll go one at a time. Buy-sell hold each one is what he wanted. So number 1 from Rudy wasn't offsides, which, by the way, I love that name also. It's the pushback against the people that always have that, oh, Rudy's offsides. Number 1, CJ Carr wins the Heisman Trophy.
From a gambling perspective, I would buy it. I would put money on it. Right now, FanDuel has him at plus 800 odds, tied for first with Arch Manning. And so it'd be worth it, I think, in my eyes. So I think it all comes down to how much you're willing to put down on it. But I think those odds would be worth it, yeah.
So number 2, from a gambling standpoint, Notre Dame wins the national championship.
I mean, again, maybe this is just some of my bias coming out, but if we're talking strictly from a betting standpoint, I would also buy this as well. They're second behind Ohio State. Ohio State's at plus 600 odds. Notre Dame's at plus 700 odds on FanDuel. So this would be something, and spoiler alert, I have already placed a bet on this. So yeah, I would buy this one as well.
And then number 3, from a gambling perspective, so this is basically betting on the over of the 11.5 over, correct, Trev?
Yes,
Notre Dame goes 12-0.
Because of the odds, and I don't love the odds, it's at plus 160 right now. I would sell this. Now, on this show, I've talked before how I think Notre Dame has the opportunity to go undefeated. But to put this in terms for our non-bettors, it's at plus 160 right now. So if I put $10 on Notre Dame to go undefeated, I would win $16. So odds-wise, it's just not worth it. And going undefeated is very, very difficult. And so I actually sell this one, even though this is the one that I think is the most likely of the 3. But the reason why is it's the most likely of the 3 is the reason because the odds are so low. Like, there's a reason why Notre Dame winning a national championship is plus 700, but them going undefeated is plus 160. So that's where I'm at from a gambling perspective.
So let me ask you this question, Trev. Let's say the odds were the same, and I gave you $1,000 and said you can make one bet. You either bet on Notre Dame to go 12-0, or you can bet on Notre Dame to win the championship. Odds are the same. Which one are you most likely to happen? Because I understand what you're saying, the most likely based on the odds. I'm saying let's pretend the odds are the same, because I actually have an interesting answer on this one. What would you say is most likely?
I'd probably still go Notre Dame goes undefeated if all things were on the table. Because in my mind, it's just once you get into that college football playoff semifinals, it's kind of like the Final Four, and it can just be anybody's game at that point in time. So that's probably what I would go with if all the odds were the same.
I would actually go with winning a championship. I think it's when you're the best team or one of the best teams. Once you get on that stage, it's like, okay, now you're going to get our best. I still think there's a greater chance that like Clemson 2016, like once they got in the playoffs, like, okay, it's going to be a wrap. Ohio State has no chance. And, it's that November game against Pitt that you overlook, where you're not overlooking your semifinal opponent. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of how I look at it. And just like you said, going undefeated is very hard. Very hard. I think the schedule makes this a little bit of a question mark, because I do think this is a more manageable schedule than maybe some past years where they had to go undefeated. But like the undefeated season in 2012, you had 2 really big potential stumbling blocks. That's it. And you're able to get one on the road and get one at home in Stanford and Oklahoma. 2018, like, once you beat Michigan, I think we all kind of thought like, yeah, this team's probably going to go undefeated after you beat Michigan in the opener, because there was nobody. I mean, your next best team on your schedule was what, Syracuse?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the reality. Is Jack Swarbrick gave Brian Kelly much easier schedules than what Lou Holtz and Bob Davie and Charlie Weiss and people like that had to deal with. It's an interesting one.
And then, Archer, to answer your question, I saw it come through. The last time a preseason Heisman favorite won the whole thing was Marcus Mariota back in 2014.
He was really good that year.
Yeah.
He was a lot of fun to watch that year.
Yeah. He wasn't bad. That's
It
for
was
sure.
like it just then that title game though it was like him against a team. And that was
Yeah.
just unfortunate. I mean, that team was just Ohio State across the board just had way better players than Oregon.
Yep. 100%. From Milk Dude, 1976. Buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame goes undefeated.
We were just kind of talking about this. I'm going to buy it because I'm just in that time of year where I'm excited about it. So, yeah, I'm going to buy it.
Love it. Same boat here. How about this one? Notre Dame has the #1 ranked offense.
I'm going to define number one as an efficiency. So, like the FEI, the Fermo Efficiency Index, then I'll buy that. I don't know if they're going to be number one in scoring because there's a lot of things to factor into that. But as far as like the number one ranked efficiency, all that type of stuff, I'll say yeah, I'll buy that one.
What about the #1 ranked defense?
Sell that one. I think they should be top 5, but I don't know. I mean, the gap between Notre Dame and Ohio State defensively is from where they were last year of how much Ohio State would have to come down or Notre Dame would have to go up is still pretty significant. So I'm going to sell that one. I think they will and should be top 5, but there's some things that Chris Ash has to prove to me before I can say that I think they're going to go out there this year and jump up and be that like kind of that #1 ranked defense. You know, like Notre Dame was 6th this year, and if you look at it, it's a 0.29. They were closer to being number 9 than they were number 1 or number 2. You know, so that's where I'm gonna go.
I'm with you. I'm selling it as well. Just for a much longer way to go than what the offense does.
Right, exactly. And offensively, they were number 4, but they were 0.05 away from number 2, or 0.06 away from number 2. Number 1 was much higher than everybody else, but they also played, I thought, a pretty weak schedule. That was Vanderbilt, but yeah, I think they have a much better pathway to become number 1 offensively than they do defensively.
Then CJ Carr wins the Heisman.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's just sometimes when you answer certain things a certain way, other things just have to naturally follow. So I'll buy that.
I'll buy it as well. He has a very strong, especially if the first 2 submissions hold true.
Exactly.
Notre Dame has the #1 efficiency offense and go undefeated in the regular season.
How can I not have him as the winner of the Heisman? That's right. My thing.
Yep. Then if all that happens, buy, sell, hold, CJ Carr stays 1 more year.
So like does he return for 2027? That's a sell.
Yep.
I'd love it if it's true, but that's a sell. Selfishly, but that's a sell.
From BK's last brain cell, Notre Dame's best offensive line in reality will be Gerby Lambert. On a national level, it will be Will Black because of him being borderline elite offensive tackle for, quote, a first-year starter. Then Anthony Knapp will be the All-American. I think Notre Dame will produce multiple on the O-line, but Knapp will be the leader.
So that's my fault on that, Trev. There was originally a period on the end of Gerby Lambert.
Oh.
That I deleted. So what he's saying is basically this is my fault because I had to edit what he said a little bit to get on there. But basically, in reality, their best lineman will be Gerby Lambert. But from a national standpoint, it'll be considered Will Black for those reasons and Anthony Knapp. But Anthony Knapp will be the All-American. So I sell it. I see a world in which Gerby Lambert is not only their best offensive lineman, but their most recognized offensive lineman. If he's not, nationally, it'll be Anthony Knapp. It won't be Will Black. I think Will Black will get a lot of, like, NFL draft scouts might fall in love with him early on. I think, but when it comes to like All-American status and who people are pointing to as their highest rated and highest graded offensive lineman, it'll be Gerby and Knapp. More so than Will Black. I think Will Black is going to be a freshman All-American this year. I do believe he'll be that, but I still think Gerby and Anthony Knapp are going to be their best.
Yeah, I do as well. I think Gerby will kind of take the cake for all recognition at every level. I'm with you there. Will Black will, Will Black, the narrative around him, especially nationally, will be like, dude, in 27, look out for.
Sure.
Yeah.
They're going to have the best tackles in the country in 27. And that, yeah, exactly. Yep. Exactly.
Cam Williams will have better stats than Quincy Porter at year's end.
I'm gonna sell that. I would love that to be true because that's not a knock on Quincy Porter. That means Cam Williams has a breakout. But I'm sort of in show me mode for Cam. He's got to show me he can do that. And it's crazy. I mean, Quincy Porter caught 4 passes last year. He still played more meaningful snaps in 1 year than Cam Williams has at 2, and caught 4 times as many passes as what Cam caught last year. So, and Cam wasn't sitting behind Jeremiah Smith. You know what I mean? So, I'm gonna sell that. I would love to be wrong. And again, I have no issue with Quincy Porter. Just you all know what I think about Cam Williams as a talent. If he has this kind of production, because I'm not projecting Quincy's going to get hurt or he'll disappoint. If I think Quincy Porter's going to be a good player. I just think Cam Williams is their most physically gifted player. I believe that to be true. He's got to show me.
No, it's fair. This is actually a really tough one, especially for somebody like me who's a Mr. Show Me person. But this is actually a hold. Because in my eyes, it's like, what takes the day? Is it the most talented guy or a redshirt freshman who is not participating in the spring coming off of an injury? I genuinely don't know that question. What takes that day? I'm not sure. The other factor here is Micah Gilbert. And not necessarily because Cam Williams and Quincy Porter will be competing for direct snaps with each other, but it's if there's an emergence from Micah Gilbert, yeah, sure, there's sets where you could have Quincy Porter and Micah Gilbert on the field at the same time, but is it as many as Cam Williams and Micah Gilbert on the field at the same time? I'm not sure. So there's a lot of moving pieces here. So for those reasons, I'm actually going to hold this one.
We were so close to getting through a show with no holds.
I know, man. Close. I know. I'm sorry. I ruined it. I soiled it.
You did. It's okay. I still love you. It's all good.
I appreciate that. Thank goodness. From Boubacar Traore. Good Lord. BK's last brain cell is who the submission is from. Boubacar Traore will lead Notre Dame in pressures and hurries, but not sacks. And then Jaden Osbury will lead in tackles for a loss.
I'm selling both of those. I think Boubacar will lead the team in sacks. I also think he'll lead the team in tackles for loss.
Yep.
I could see Jaden Osbury leading the defense in tackles, like the linebacking core in tackles for loss. But even then, I'd probably bet on Drake Bowen or Kingston being there. But Jaden will have a shot to do that. I just think Boubacar is going to lead the team in all of those categories.
Yep.
We did have a couple super chats pop in here, Trev, some Bisa Hold super chats. So let's just bring those up real quick.
Yeah, from Blue Holtz, Thunder and Bolts, appreciate you. If the number allowed transfers does get implemented, or if the numbers of transfers allowed gets implemented, would this benefit Notre Dame more because of their strengths in player development and the 4 for 40 and high school recruiting?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know that a lot would change for Notre Dame because, as we mentioned, I think DJ McKinney is the only player that I can think of from Notre Dame that's transferred more than once. Riley Leonard had only transferred once. Bo Collins, Jaden Harrison, Chris Mitchell. Oh, goodness. Javante Jean-Baptiste, Jordan Clark, Thomas Harper, Jaden Sanders, Brandon Joe. I'm just trying. I can't think of anybody that's transferred more than once prior to DJ McKinney. But I would imagine that the graduate rule would still be in play, which means DJ McKinney still could have come to Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Because he only transferred once as an undergrad. So I don't think it hurts Notre Dame a whole lot. I think what it hurts are some of these other teams that are going to have guys that are moving for a third or fourth time. Like in this new world, let's just say the rule was enacted. Miami can't go get Darian Mensah. Did Cooper Barcotti start at Harvard, or did he commit to Harvard? And
I'm not sure.
I'm actually going to look that up real quick. So, but that's an example of a player who, like Darian Mensah is a guy that they couldn't have landed. So I think those things all factor into it for me. Yeah, it does sound like he did play at Harvard. So they wouldn't have been able to get him either. He would have had to stay at Duke. The biggest thing for me that and we didn't touch on this enough during the beginning, but the biggest thing that the one-time transfer rule, if done correctly, the way that we proposed, would benefit is that would lead to a natural tamping down a lot of the tampering, which then also reins in some of the crazy NIL spending. Like Texas Tech couldn't have gone. Notre Dame could have still got Francis Brew. They still could have got Tion Garay. They still could have got Keon Keeley. They still could have got Jaden Sanders. Like everybody like that, they could have got all those guys. I think also Notre Dame would be a much more attractive place to someone knowing that this transfer is a longer term commitment if I am a younger player. So I'm going to Notre Dame with the focus on getting that degree. So I think that rule would help Notre Dame a lot. But I also feel that the transfer portal has been very beneficial to Notre Dame either way. I don't think it necessarily helps them more than it does before, but I think it would help them more relative to how it helps other teams. I think it would hurt some teams who've benefited. Like are any of Ohio State's transfers been guys that were more than one school? I can't think of any.
No.
None of the top ones. Josh Jackson wasn't. Quinshawn wasn't. Igbenogson wasn't. Caleb Downs wasn't. Like, I can't think of a lot of, so I think teams like that would still be fine. And now what would happen is less guys are leaving after their first year just because things didn't work out. Maybe Quincy Porter stays at Ohio State for another year to see if he becomes a guy. Maybe he doesn't. I don't know. Those are the question marks that we really don't know. But I don't think it would hurt teams like Notre Dame and Ohio State and Georgia. I think there are teams that could hurt, but not Notre Dame.
Yeah, I'm with
I
that.
think it helps. And then here's the second super chat.
From Raymond Hartman, appreciate you. What makes Will Black a left tackle and Gerby Lambert a right tackle the better lineup for 2026? With left tackle being so important, why would you not put the more experienced player there?
Because I think it's a very, very fair question, Raymond, because more experience doesn't always make you better suited. The one thing about Gerby is I think Gerby can play left tackle, but Gerby's played right tackle his whole career. He played right tackle in high school. He didn't play left tackle in high school. So Gerby Lambert is a grand total of 1 snap at left tackle the last 4 years in a game. And that was 1 snap against Purdue. Now, we've joked he looked pretty good in that snap, right?
Yeah.
But what you're doing is you're saying, here's where we think when they develop the best is. Will is more of a natural left-handed player. He's more of a natural left tackle. He's more of a natural elite level pass blocker. Now he needs work. Also, Gerby is a more physically dominant run blocker. You tend to see teams put their more dominant blocking side to the right, just kind of the way that it goes. And so I think those things factor into it, Trev, that say, okay, Gerby's more natural at right. You'd have to be teaching him sort of something new. I think he could do it. There's no question he could do it, but it's just, those are the things that factor into the conversation. What's interesting, though, is last year Notre Dame actually ran more to the left than they did to the right. But in a lot of years, that's often not the case. But yeah, it's an interesting discussion. And then also the thing to consider is sometimes that can be misleading because, like, if you're running a lot of inside zone, then running to the right actually means you're running to the left. So, for example, Notre Dame ran about 30 times more to the left in 2024 than they did in 2023. But if you look at how many times they ran inside zone, you start to break it down, and it's kind of similar in that instance. So I think all those things factor into why teams tend to do that. And then even if you run more to the left than the right, but you may run more right when it's a short yardage situation, things like that. So there's a whole lot of things that factor into those conversations.
That's fair.
Good questions.
From BK's personal chef, buy one, sell one, hold one of the following scenarios according to what you think is most to least likely. So buy is most likely, sell would be least likely. So first option here is both Miami and BYU lose to Notre Dame, but win their conference championship games. And as a result, Notre Dame is a top 2 team come Selection Sunday. Second one is neither Georgia nor Alabama make the SEC championship game, but both are still in the playoffs. Fun fact, last time this happened was 2010. And then the Big Ten championship game is played between Oregon and Ohio State, but Oregon bests the Buckeyes by 2 possessions, and then Michigan misses the playoffs, and USC loses 5 games this year.
Of those options, oh boy.
I got my order.
Go ahead.
So I'm selling neither Georgia or Alabama make the SEC championship game for this sole fact. The next time Georgia doesn't make it will be the first time in quite some time.
Right.
And they're kind of the team that has kind of proven that. I'm torn between which one I'm going to buy.
And to his point, the last time one of those two teams wasn't in the SEC title game was all the way back in 2010.
Yeah.
And that required Cam Newton to bring them back from down like 21-0 to beat Alabama to even get there.
Yep. So that's the one I'm selling. I'm torn because after the Big Ten championship game outcome where Oregon beats Ohio State by 2 touchdowns, I could see the rest of that happening. Michigan missing the playoffs and USC losing 5 games. I don't think that that's beyond the realm of possibility. But I'll probably hold that one because I could see Oregon and Ohio State playing for the Big Ten championship game. I just don't know if Oregon beats them by 2 possessions. Now, that could be 10 points, could be 9 points. I get that, but I don't know if I see that.
Here's why I'm buying that one, Trev, because I have the same sentiment that you do. I feel like if they play in a Big Ten championship game, it's going to be a very close game. What are the odds? What's more likely that either Ohio State just doesn't play well that game, or 2 possessions could be 10 points, could be 9 points. Oregon, Ohio State's down 7, goes for it on 4th down. They don't get it. Oregon goes down, kicks a field goal with a minute left to make it a 10-point game. Or BYU beats Texas Tech. And that's where I don't think BYU wins the Big 12. That's really I think it's more likely that there's some scenario Ohio State's driving, they're down 3. They drive and they fumble a ball and it gets returned for a touchdown or a pick 6 or something like that. You know what I mean? Like I could see something like that happening where Ohio State has to go for it on 4th down and Oregon punches it in at the end of the game to win by 14. You know what I mean? Like
sure.
A lot like the Texas-Ohio State semifinal game. It ended up being 28-14, but everybody that watched that knew that was a great game between 2 good teams. It wasn't really a 14-point game. Like I could see something like that happening before I see BYU beating Texas Tech in the Big 12 title game. That's why I picked those 2.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. It's close. Yeah. It is close. Then buy one, sell one, hold one of the following by how much you would personally enjoy the moments. Assume each moment wins the game. So the first option is you're a corner who successfully gets a sack on a cornerback blitz. You lay the quarterback out with an emphatic tackle to boot. Okay. Then you're a defensive tackle who gets a pick 6 off your own batted ball. You can choose your celebration. I like the sexy Dexy personally. And then the third option is you're a linebacker who gets a sack on 4th down and you had to beat an offensive tackle man on man to get to the quarterback. You still have the ball in your hands on your own sideline as the whistle blows.
This is an easy one for me, Trev. I'm going to buy that I'm a corner who successfully gets a sack on a cornerback blitz because that means I'm skinny and fast. I'm going to hold that I'm a linebacker who gets a 4th down sack because even though I'm a bigger guy and I'm still pretty athletic, I've got a pretty probably rocked up frame and I'm still a pretty good athlete, but not quite corner fast. I'm going to sell that I'm a D tackle because if I'm a D tackle, that means I'm still real big and fat and not as athletic. And I wouldn't want to be that. So that's how I'm going to go with my buy. So hold on this one, Trev.
Well played, sir.
Yes,
that's very well played. I'm going to take the opposite approach. I'm going to be the defensive tackle so then I don't have to monitor what I eat. I'll buy that one. I am going to hold linebacker because speed-wise, I think I resonate more with a linebacker than what I do a corner. In all reality, I probably resonate more with a D tackle than what I do even a linebacker. But for the sake of this argument, I will hold linebacker and then I will sell corner because there's no chance in heck outside of one defensive coordinator that was in South Bend from 14 to 16 that would ever put me at corner.
He might. You know, I knew the offense. I ran a 5-2, but I knew the defense. Yeah.
From Eddie82, there are 3 or more offensive linemen on the current roster who will be a consensus All-American before their careers are over.
Oh, man. I'll actually buy that. I know that sounds crazy, but I'll actually buy that. My first thought was, dude, there's no way that's going to happen. Like even the 2017 Notre Dame offensive line didn't have that. The problem is that we look at this from a starting lineup standpoint, but actually the 2017 offensive line did have that because you had 4 actually. You had Quentin Nelson and Mike McGlinchey who were that in 2017. But then also on that roster was Aaron Banks and Liam Eichenberg, who went on to become consensus All-Americans at Notre Dame in 2020. So you had 4. So I'll buy that. I said at some point in time in their career. So between Gerby Lambert, Anthony Knapp, Will Black, Charles Jagasol, Grayson McHugh, Tyler Merrill, Sullivan Garvin, Ashton Craig, Matty Augustine, even, Ben Nichols. Did I say Tyler Merrill yet? Like, I mean, there's a lot of options that only 3 of them have to get there. And the other one could be 4 years from now. Because again, in 2017, the 2 of the guys that are among the 4 I talked about were true freshmen. They didn't play in 2017. But at some point in time in their career, they did. So that's why I'll buy that, because we've seen that.
Yeah, it's a buy for me as well, and there's a chance that this could get knocked out in the next 2 years. Like, it wouldn't shock me if Anthony Knapp was a consensus All-American this year, and then both tackles, Will Black and Gerby Lambert, are consensus All-Americans in 2027.
It wouldn't completely shock me if Gerby and Anthony are both that way this year.
100%.
Because there's so many of the best tackles in the game are now off the NFL. There's an opportunity for him to step into that spotlight. But yeah, I agree with you. I mean, you're right, Dred. There's a chance that 3 guys in the current starting lineup could be that.
It's crazy.
But when I list all the guys I just listed, I'd be surprised if 3 of them don't.
Oh, absolutely. Odds are. Yes, I'm with you. And then there are 3 or more running backs on the current roster who will rush for more than 1,000 yards during a season before their career is over.
That one I'm not as high on. That one I'm going to sell, because that means that 3 guys had to stay for multiple seasons of somebody else rushing for 1,000 yards. And I think that's less likely.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so let's say Aeneas rushes for 1,000 yards this year. And then next year, Nolan or Kedron does it. And then a year later, assuming he goes pro, then Javion or Jonas or Nolan does it. And I just think that by some point in time, some of those guys will most likely leave. So I'll sell that one.
Yep, I'm with you.
Yeah. And by the way, Johnny, I did not call defensive tackles fat. I said I would be fat. For me to be a defensive tackle, I would not have a naturally strong 300-pound frame. I would have a fat 300-pound frame. So that was a comment on Brian Driscoll, not D tackles. This dude's trying to get me jumped at the next press availability with defensive tackles. So that's not what I said, just so we're clear. And yes, Francis Brew would have word with me, and he would rightfully so. I was talking about me.
Some more from Eddie82. Buy, sell, hold. CJ Carr will complete 70% of his pass attempts in 2026.
I'll sell that one. I think he'll be slightly below that, but he'll be close. I just think Notre Dame is going to be very aggressive throwing the ball down the field.
Yep.
And that will dip him slightly under 70, but he'll be close. He was at 66 last year.
Yeah.
So yeah, he'll be close.
I'm with you. Like, he's an efficient gunslinger is how I like to talk about him. It's like, so I don't think he'll be at 70%, but I think he'd be around 68 this year. I could see that completely. Yeah. Then CJ Carr will break Brady Quinn's season passing touchdown record of 37 in 2006.
If we're including playoffs, I buy that. If we're including just regular season, I sell that.
Yep. Agreed. And then Bob Crable's 521 career tackles is the most unbreakable Notre Dame football record.
I'm gonna sell that. I'm gonna buy that in the current era. But if what I think happens over the next couple years, which is they go, you have 5 years to play 5, there will be some Jack Kaiser type of guy who is going to have a mess of tackles. And if Notre Dame is the program I think they're going to be playing 14 to 16 games every year.
Yeah.
It's unlikely, but like there's a couple, I'm trying to pull up a couple other stats. There's a couple others, Trev, like I think like 10 interceptions in a season. There's somebody that had like there's a couple really crazy stats. I will say this, it is amongst the most unlikely to break. And I'd have to go through it, but I'm actually going to pull up the 2024 record book here and find some statistics. But like, yeah, there's some stats that are like for career stats, but like there's some other stuff like some rushing stuff that's a little bit crazy. So like most carries in a game, 40. I don't know if we're going to see that. Most rushing yards per attempt. Let's go to some career numbers. Like George Gipp had some crazy 8 yards per attempt over a season. Let's see here. Vegas Ferguson averaged 27.4 rushing attempts per game. That'll be tough to do. I'm trying to find where's the one for George Gipp. Yards per attempt. Yeah, rushing yards in a game, rushing yards per attempt. Let's find it here. I'm looking through some of these statistics. Where is the yards per attempt? I'm trying to find this here real quick, folks. Give me a second. Rushing yards per attempt. That's for a game. I want to find for a season. Okay, rushing yards attempt, rushing yards, freshman rushing yards, quarterback, rushing yards a game. Here's a George Gipp in 1920 averaged 8.1 yards per attempt. Reggie Brooks in 1992 has 8.0. The next highest number after that was 7.5. That was in 1930. Josh Adams is a 7.14. So think about that. Josh Adams running behind that offensive line was still, in 2015, was still over about a yard behind George Gipp. Jeremiah Love, in one of the most spectacular seasons in Notre Dame history, was well over a yard underneath that. Like, that's going to be tough to do for a minimum 100 snaps in your career. That's going to be really hard to do. Jeremiah Love, the last 2 years, as good as he was a 6.9 both years. That's one of those records that can't be broken because you got an extra year of eligibility the way that Bob Craple's record could. Matter of fact, the longer you play, the less likely that record is to be broken. So,
yeah, I'm with you. That record's insane. It's nuts.
Yeah. Yep. All right, so let's go back to this one. Oops. Give me a second. You got to pull the buy so hold cards back up. I think I deleted those, so just give me a second, Trev.
No worries.
All right, let's go to where were we? Whose question were we on? Do you remember?
Eddie 82.
Eddie 82
about Bob Crable's.
Okay, so let's go here. All right, we'll find this one. We'll find Eddie's. All right. Yeah, getting rid of the apparently when it opened up the tab, the records tab, it put it into the same tab as the questions. So I've got to pull those up. But we were at Eddie 82. All right, we're getting close there. There we go. So there we go. So now we'll go to Z-Man.
Given Drew Pine's college trajectory, now a quarterback at Bowling Green, Tommy Rees's coaching job in 2022 is the best of any Notre Dame position coach in the 21st century.
Okay, I can't go. I understand where you're going from it, but I can't quite go with you there. I mean, there's been some great coaching jobs done. Mike Mickens secondary in 2024. Harry Heastand's offensive lines in 15 and 17. Like, there's a lot of great records. However, I will buy the sentiment that you're trying to accomplish, where I don't think Tommy Rees gets enough credit for the job he did in 2022. You had an inexperienced quarterback to start the season. He goes down. You have a pretty challenging schedule. You put Drew Pine in the game, who, I mean, he went to Bowling Green this past year. Drew Pine in 2022 had a quarterback rating of over 155. He averaged 8 yards attempt, had 22 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. This past year at Bowling Green, he played 6 games, Trev. He averaged 5.8 yards per attempt. You know, he was a 5-game starter, only passed for 882 yards in 5 starts. He had 4 touchdowns and 5 picks. In his last 2 games against Louisville and Ohio, he had 2 touchdowns and 5 picks. You look at his numbers after that, and I've pointed to several times. Look at Jalen Milroe's stats the year with Tommy Rees, and then the year after without Tommy Rees and Kalen DeBoer. He looked like he didn't know how to read a defense or throw a ball, but he was a Heisman contender under Tommy Rees. This is why I say people don't give Tommy Rees enough credit for him as a quarterback developer and play caller in some areas. Now, was he perfect? No, but he was like 30. But yeah, he did some really good things that year with a guy as the anticipated number one receiver who, was a guy that ended up being a nickel at Ohio State. You know what I mean? Another receiver we were hoping would be really good who transferred to Miami of Ohio and was a role player as a receiver. Like there were a lot of things you could point to and say it was actually pretty impressive what he did that year. And no one's going to change their mind on Tommy Rees ever. But these are things that I point to and say, I'm not trying to say Tommy Rees is the smartest guy that's ever walked the face of the earth, but he doesn't get enough credit for the job he did at Notre Dame. And he recruited how many current Power 4 starting quarterbacks? CJ Carr, Kenny Minchie, Steve Angeli, all recruited to Notre Dame by Tommy Rees.
Yeah, his coaching job in 22 is definitely in the discussion for me. I'd put it up there amongst the top. I would also, another coaching job by a position coach that gets very slept on is Al Washington's job in 2024. He had that defensive line playing at a championship caliber level, and that was with losing Boubacar. Jordan Patella was out. Riley Mills was lost after the first game of the playoffs. Howard Cross was banged up. That was a very, very underrated coaching job by Al Washington in 2024. So I'd put it up in discussion with that one because that was a heck of a job, but he just doesn't get nearly enough credit for that one outside of like this community. So then another one from Z-Man. Buy-sell hold. The difference between a very good and great wide receiver room in 2026 is the play of Micah Gilbert.
I'm going to sell this, and it has nothing to do with Micah Gilbert and everything to do with how deep this receiving core is. This, Z-Man, your statement is one that I completely understand, and it's something as Notre Dame fans we've been living with forever. If this one guy pans out, they're going to be good, but if he doesn't, they're in trouble. That has been true at Notre Dame for a long time. I don't believe that's true this year. If Micah Gilbert doesn't pan out, but Quincy Porter does, or Cam Williams does, they're still elite. If Micah Gilbert's just a solid number 2, but Jaden Greathouse does all year what he did in 24 in the playoffs, and Jordan Faison builds on what he did last year and looks like the guy he was in the playoffs in 2024 all year, and Mylan Graham's every bit as good as we think he can be, then there's still going to be a great receiving core. There's just so many more options now that this guy is going to determine whether they are or are not great. It's just a different world. And so that response of selling has nothing to do with Micah Gilbert. It's just that you're no longer in the world of, if this guy doesn't pan out, you're not as good. You're just not in there. Now, I think Micah Gilbert's being overlooked by a lot of people, and I think maybe that's where Z-Man's coming from here. It's just assumed. I mean, think about the earlier question we have. By the end of the year, the 2 Ohio State guys are going to be the best receivers. It's not a given that Quincy Porter's even going to be able to beat out Micah Gilbert, much less be one of the top 2 receivers on the roster. But let's say that Micah Gilbert's every bit the player we think he is, but still gets beaten by Quincy Porter. It's just a different animal now, Trev, than it has been in the past, and that's why I sell this one. And it is not even remotely about why I do or don't think it's, Micah. It's whether I do or don't think Micah Gilbert's a really good player.
How about this one? Buy, sell, hold each one. So the Notre Dame season is a failure if, 1, they don't make the semifinals.
Buy.
Agreed completely. Or the second one, if they don't make the finals.
Sell, and I'll answer the next one, and then I'll explain why, Trev.
3rd, win the national championship.
Sell. There's a world in which they get to the semifinals or the championship and lose to a better team. Notre Dame's coaches could go out there this year and absolutely get the most out of this roster. And Texas is just slightly better. Or Oregon is slightly better. Or Ohio State is slightly better. Or Georgia is slightly better. You know what I mean? Like, there's a world in which that is true. And if you just get the most out of your team, but another team just is better than you, then that's the breaks. Sometimes that's the breaks. The '05 USC team was a great team. Texas was better. The '05 Ohio State team was a great team. Penn State was better that one particular day. Doesn't take away from how great that team was. It just, the thing that could make losing one of those two, losing in the semis or losing the championship game, disappointing is why you lose. It's not simply the fact that you do lose. It's why. Do you not play well? Do you not coach well? Do you get beat by an inferior opponent? That would make it a disappointing finish in a disappointing season, not simply just losing one of those. I would need to know what the circumstances are. Well, we think Notre Dame has the best roster in the country, but it's not so exorbitantly better than everybody else that there's not a world in which one of a couple teams just has a better roster. Notre Dame gets that matchup in the semifinals, and that team is just slightly better than Notre Dame. And they lose a 31-30 ball game or something like that. There's no shame in that. If it's a situation where, hey, they played the best they can, coached the best they can, that team was just better. That's the difference. There's no shame in Miami losing to Indiana in the championship game. That Indiana was the better team. They got outplayed, outcoached by a better team. There's no shame in that. Now, if Miami had gotten beat by Ole Miss, that'd have been a little bit more disappointing because you had a better roster than Ole Miss. You had better coaches than Ole Miss. You know what I mean, Trev? Like, that's the difference. There'd have been no shame in Indiana losing to Oregon or Miami. There would have been shame in Indiana losing to Alabama. You know what I mean? Because that's where I'm coming from. That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Failure is a strong word, but I'm confident in saying I think this season would be a failure if they don't make the semifinals. We've been very bullish about Notre Dame having a top 3 roster, being a top 3 team in college football. It would be tough to deem this season not a failure any way that you try to spin it if they don't make it to be one of the top 4 teams in college football. Like, I think
they're not getting beat by one of those teams.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that would make it and failure in any sense. Even if it's, what if it's injury plagued? It's like, then that's a failure to a degree. It's not necessarily all in your hands, but that stinks. I'm with you completely on the national championship one. We see that very much the same, but I'm very comfortable saying this season would be a failure if they don't make the semifinals. From Dirtbag Jake 13, Notre Dame will have a 7-man wide receiver rotation.
I buy this from the course of the entire season, but not in each game each week. There will be, to me, 7 guys over the course of the season that are part of the receiver rotation. I don't think that you're going to see a lot of games where it's a 7-man rotation. There'll be games where more than 7 receivers play.
Yeah.
But that's because you're beating a team 41-0 in the fourth quarter. Now, I think going past 6 is going to be really tough unless it's a scenario where they have a guy that comes in and plays as part of the goal line package like we saw with Matt Jeffrey last year.
Sure.
But I think 5 to 6 is the number that you're going to see as far as on a weekly basis. Now, who's in that 5 or 6 might change from week to week, Trev, and that's where I get to 7. But I think 5 to 6 on a weekly basis is where I see this being.
Yep, I'm with that. How about this one? All 5 running backs will have over 30 rushing attempts if healthy.
I'm going to sell that, Trev. I'm looking up to some recent years to see if they've had that in the past. Are we talking regular season?
I am. Yeah.
You had 4 guys. You had only 3 guys 2 years ago. Jeremiah Love, Jordan Price, and Aeneas were all over 30, but Kedron and Devin Ford were not. You had 4 guys get over. You had 4 guys get over 30 in 2023, but not a 5th. The 5th guy was at 8. 2022, you had 3 guys get over at least 100, but the next highest running back was at like 3. Getting 30 touches for 5 guys is going to be really tough. I mean, think about it. Let's just say that 3 backs get at least 30 as part of the normal 3-man rotation. That's 60 carries that those 4th and 5th back would need to get over the course of a season. and you're saying, like, let's say half of their games are blowouts, they'd have to get at least an average of 6 carries and combined in half the games to get over 30 each. You know what I mean? Like, that's actually, no, it's more than that. If they play blowouts, they'd have to get 60 carries. They'd have to get, that's 10 a game, right? Am I doing the math wrong here? That's a lot of carries in half the games. That's assuming that they even get that many games where they're, because there's going to be some games where the first guy getting blowout snaps is your number 3 back to get him some work. So I'm gonna sell that one.
Yeah, I am too. That the road to 30 for all 5 backs would be tough. And honestly, and I know it kind of goes against the question because you said if healthy, but the only way that I see that happening is if people get hurt. Like, running back one, and I'm not even going to put names on it, but if RB1, plays the first 2 games, has 30 carries between the first 2, and then gets hurt for the rest of the season, then RB2 steps up, and that's the only way that I see that happening.
Right. It's like in 2015, Trev, where people are like, well, look, they used a nice running back rotation in 2015. CJ Prosise had 1,000 yards. Josh Adams had over 800. Josh Adams wasn't sniffing 800 yards if CJ Prosise didn't get hurt.
Or Tarian Folston.
Right. Well, I mean, even if just like, yeah, that's a great point. I mean, just Torrey got hurt so early, but like up until the Pitt game, which is in November, Josh Adams had played some mop-up minutes. He had 5 carries against Texas. He had a 100-yard game against UMass. He wasn't coming close to 800 yards rushing.
Right.
Until CJ went down. Then he had over 100 yards against Pitt. He had over 100 yards against Wake Forest. He had over 100 yards against Stanford. He put up all those numbers after CJ went down.
Yep.
And so end of the year, the point is it required some injuries to get to that point in time.
How about this one? This is an interesting one. Kingston Viliama-Asa will be ready to play game 1.
I'll buy that because he didn't say how ready. He didn't say full go, 70 snaps, ready to go. Do I think Kingston will be, ready to play by game 1 in some capacity? Yeah, I'll buy that's a possibility. It's not a given, but it's a possibility. Because I mean, you're talking about 6 to 8 months from surgery, right? So he got hurt in November. So December, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August. You're talking about 8-9 months from a surgery is when the season will start. So yeah, it's possible. I don't think he's your starting Will and plays 60 snaps in game 1.
Agreed. Agreed. I buy that he could be ready to go in game 1. The onus is going to be on the coaching staff to make sure that they have a really steady load management for him. Because look, fact of the matter is, you're not going to need Kingston to beat any opponent in your month of September, but you need him out in Provo. You need him against Navy on Halloween. You need him against Miami on November 7th, and you'll need him on Senior Day against SMU. I would rather have him back there. And he even said it in one of his press conferences. He wants to come back at 200%. So if he's 80% against Wisconsin, you don't need him to beat Wisconsin, but you'll need him to beat Miami. That's the biggest thing. Load management for KVA is going to be very interesting early on in the season. Very interesting. Then another one from Dirtbag Jake. Notre Dame will put college football on notice week 1 with a huge show out at Lambeau Field.
I'm going to sell that. I don't think that if Notre Dame goes out there, somebody in the chat, Raymond, said bye. He said Notre Dame 52, Wisconsin 10. Trevor, if Notre Dame goes out and beats a Wisconsin team that went, what was their record last year? 3-9, 4-8. If they go out there and beat it, now we both think that they're going to be improved, but they're still going to be perceived in the opener as the team that went 4-8 and lost to Minnesota and, Maryland and got blown out by Alabama. And you know what I mean? They're still going to be that team. I don't know that Notre Dame absolutely destroying them necessarily puts anyone on notice. I think all it does is confirm, yeah, they're really flipping good. It's going to you're not going to put people on notice until you go into Provo and whoop BYU. That's when the rest of CFB is going to be like, whoa, okay, they are legit.
I'll do you one better. If they don't go out and put on a show in week 1, it will put college football on notice, but not the way that Notre Dame fans want them to. They're going to assume that Notre Dame is going to go out and win by 20 some odd points.
That's right.
And if they don't, it'll be an Alabama team that got beat by 35 in the playoffs last year, decimated that Wisconsin team.
Yeah.
Like, now you can't do it. And I know for all the reasons why we're Irish Breakdown, we can dive into the opponent's rosters and their film and all that. And we can state a good case as to why it did or did not happen. But the major narrative in college football will be, you see, Notre Dame only beat that horrible Wisconsin team by 17. And
Right.
like, it will be that.
If they beat them 52-10, like Raymond predicted, I don't think that puts anybody on notice. I just think that means, okay, Notre Dame's really good. Well, we all thought they were already really good. They're a top 5 team, and Wisconsin's picked in the bottom half of the Big Ten. They should beat a team like that. Now, as Patrick Bateman said, like if they go 10-2, except but that's the end of the year. We'll already know who Notre Dame is by that point in time, and no one's going to care what they did in week 1.
Right.
It'll look better on their resume, but it's not a put them on notice moment. It certainly could help their resume at the end of the year from a seeding standpoint. If Patrick is right and they go like 10-2, and that win is viewed differently in November as it is in September, but that still won't be a put CFB on notice. What I do think, however, Trev, is I do think there's a world in which Notre Dame just physically looks so dominant in that game that some people are like, okay, that's interesting. I think how they win could matter. I think if they go out there, and this goes back to a comment you had, I think in a recent Buy So Hold, maybe it was a mailbag, Trevor, where you talked about how their first touchdown, and you were talking about how you'd like to see them just go on this like long drive. They just run the ball down people's throats. Let's say they come out in the opener and CJ throws for 275, but they also run for 250 and win 50. Now that might be something that puts CFB on notice. You're like, dude, they're still dominant running the football. Like, there is that world, but I don't think that even then it's still like, okay, but it's still Wisconsin.
Yeah. I'm with that. By and large, that's what the narrative will be, but the fashion and how they win. Because we watched Brian Kelly led teams beat a team 52-10, but it was 14-10 at halftime.
Right.
So like if they, I was watching the highlights of the UMass game from 2015 earlier today. I just came up on my suggested and that's how that game was. It's like final score. You look at it, it's like, well, you should have. It's like, yeah, well, at halftime, it did not look like that. So
and not only that, Trev, but if you remember, it was like, I think it was like 28-20, like 28-20.
Yep.
And CJ Sanders returned a punt for a touchdown like late in the first half that really broke that one open. But like even up until that point in time, it was a competitive football game. It was 35-20 at halftime. And it was 21-20 in the second quarter. CJ has the punt return to make it 28-20. Chris Brown, and now I'm looking at the stats. So I remember that punt making it be 28-20. And then they scored a touchdown with 6 seconds left in half to make it 35-20. Halfway through the second quarter, it was a 21-20 football game.
Mm-hmm.
So the final score wasn't like, oh, wow, you beat UMass. You gave up 27 points to UMass.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's kind of the how. Like, not just 52-10, but what's in the 52-10. Is it like 42-0 at halftime and they ran for 200 yards? And as Raymond points out, the D line is just got like 7 sacks, and you know what I mean? Like, there could be a way in which they do that, but I think even then, I still think the national narrative is going to be it's Wisconsin.
Yep.
Now, if Alabama did that, it'd be a different story.
Well, they go for it on fourth down, Brian.
Correct.
I mean, we know how that stuff works.
Exactly.
Getting into the final part of the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. We got the Buy So Hold going on today. And getting us started here to take us home is T-Shop 11. Buy So Hold, the Heisman Trophy finalists will be C.J. Carr, Arch Manning, Julian Sain, and your choice of the highest production linebacker.
Sell. I think Dante Moore will be a finalist for the Heisman Trophy. So any list that doesn't have Dante on it, I'm going to push back on.
Yeah, and I think there's a world where I think somebody from Ohio State makes it, but I find it hard to believe that Jeremiah Smith won't be. I think he's going to put up gaudy numbers this year, especially now.
Meaning, Trev, here, if it's C.J. Carr, Arch, and Julian Sain, the fourth will be Jeremiah Smith, not a linebacker.
Yes. Yes, or it could be C.J. Carr, Arch Manning, Dante Moore, and Jeremiah Smith. One of those.
I love this response from Patrick Bateman in the chat. If Bama beats Wisconsin by 50, they'll rank Wisconsin in the top 25. That is such a great comment, and so factually true.
Oh, yeah.
That's a great one.
Here's another one from T. Schaub. Georgia has won the SEC 2 years in a row, so buy, sell, hold these teams' chances to dethrone them. So buy one, sell one, hold one. The three teams in question, we have Alabama, LSU, and Texas.
I'm going to buy Texas. I'm going to hold Alabama, and I'm going to sell LSU. I think LSU certainly has an opportunity this year to knock Georgia out of it, but I still think they have something to prove, right? I mean, we have seen Texas be on that stage in recent years. So they haven't beaten Georgia yet, but they've gotten to that stage, and you have to get to that stage to have an opportunity to beat that team. So they haven't beat Georgia yet. I get that, but they've played them 3 times, and they've had plenty of opportunities, and they've played them in the postseason. So obviously you have to get there to have a shot to beat them, right? I mean, that's a big part of it. Georgia has to play at Alabama this year. So that gives Alabama a chance to dethrone Georgia, and that's the one team that has done that. Who's the last team, to beat Georgia in the SEC championship game? It was Alabama. Now, Georgia has not won the SEC title in recent years. They didn't win it in 2023. Why didn't they win it in 2023? Because they lost to Alabama. Those teams have proven they can either A, get on that plane, and B, that they can win once they get there to some degree. One has proven that, the other's proven they can get there. LSU has to prove that they can get there, and they don't play Georgia in the regular season. So in order for them to dethrone them, I have to see that they're going to get to the SEC title game. And while I think LSU is a much improved team, Trev, I don't think either one of us are going to have them number 2 in our preseason rankings, even if we have them in the top 10.
Agreed. We have the same exact order there. Same order.
Great minds think alike, my friend.
Love it. Love it. Love it.
I should have put that one. Yeah, that's my bad on putting that twice.
No worries, man. These sleeper teams to play in their respective conference championships this year. Buy one, sell one, hold one. Virginia Tech, Michigan, and Houston.
Well, I think we both buy Houston of the two, Trev. I mean, Trev's even been high, Trev's even higher on Houston than I am. So if that happens, I'll give him a ton of credit for that one. The reason I can't go with Michigan on this one, Trev, I'm gonna have to sell Michigan, is because I think Michigan of the teams has the tougher league to play in and the tougher schedule. You look at Virginia Tech, the ACC is more winnable than the Big Ten.
Oh yeah.
You look at their schedule; it's not going to be easy. But there's they play at BC. This is their conference games at BC, home against Pitt, at Cal, home against Georgia Tech, at Clemson, at SMU, home against Stanford, at Miami, home against Virginia. If they hold serve at home and then just go 1-2 at Clemson, at SMU, at Miami, there's a chance they're still playing for the ACC championship and trying to get a rematch win over somebody. We just saw a team last year win the ACC that lost 5 flipping regular season games, including to Tulane and UConn. It's not a great achievement to play in and win the conference championship in the ACC right now. It's a little tougher to get there in the Big Ten and the ACC. You know what I mean? Especially the Big Ten. And when you look at Michigan's schedule this year, Trev, they've got to play Iowa at home, Penn State at home, Indiana at home, Michigan State at home, which is challenging. And then they've got to play at Oregon and at Ohio State. That means you've got to either pull off an upset at Oregon and at Ohio State and go 1-1 in those games. And then, then you can afford a loss to an Iowa, a Penn State, or an Indiana, or you've got to run the table at home against an Iowa, a Penn State, and an Indiana, and then hope that nobody else has 2 or more losses. None of those teams have 2 or more losses. You know what I mean? Like I could see a world in which they finish third and the 2 teams playing for the championship are the ones that beat them in November, Ohio State and Oregon. But they got to still prove me that they can beat Indiana, much less Oregon at home, much less Oregon and Ohio State on the road. So I'm going to sell Michigan. I just think the road is tougher. I think Michigan could be the best team of all 3 of these. But it's not about who's the best team. It's who has the best odds within their respective leagues to win it all. And I think that's Michigan.
Oh, I agree completely. And our friends over at FanDuel think the exact same thing. There is a sizable gap between the class of the Big Ten and then Michigan in terms of like who they predict to win the championship. I mean, Ohio State's at plus 190 odds. Indiana's at plus 260 odds. Oregon is at plus 290 odds. Then Michigan is a distant fourth at plus 1200.
Yeah.
So that agreed.
And I misspoke on that last part. I said it's who has the best chance to win, and I said, and that's Michigan. I meant to say, and that's not Michigan. I think Michigan has the least best odds to win, even though I think they're the best team. Yeah.
Yeah. From Ballpeen Shillelagh.
T-Shope's kind of questioning his bias. I actually think your bias to hold submission was fine. I think those are three good teams to bring up.
Absolutely.
I don't think, and the fact that Michigan is the best team on that list, but not the team that we picked, I think is what makes it a good submission. So I disagree with your kind of, I should have done it differently. I think that's a very good submission. And you picked sleeper teams, but not like one of the top 2 to 3 teams necessarily in the league. So I think it was a very good submission. I think those were 3 good teams to put on there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's more indicative of the conference than it is your selection of teams. I mean, it's not like you picked Maryland as a sleeper team to win the Big Ten. You know what I mean? I'm with you.
Right. And it's like we have to discuss, okay, the team that we think is the best team of those 3 is not the team we think has got the best chance to win their league, which again, you have to put some context and all that, which I think is a really good question. And I think is what made that a good submission. So be so hard on yourself. It's a really good one.
From Ballpeen Shillelagh, buy one, sell one, hold one. Specific quarterback traits you'd want in a starter. So number 1 is elite arm power, 2 is elite timing, and 3 is elite scrambling slipperiness.
I would buy elite timing, hold elite arm power, and sell elite scrambling slipperiness. Just because of the offense that I would want to run. In other offenses, I think you would elite arm power would come last. But in the offense that I like to run, if you have great timing and you have a big arm, you can run my offense even if you're a little bit stiff.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I would I'll probably go the same order. Yeah. I'll go
2 and 3 is not easy to buy. It came easier to me, Trev, because I remember thinking about this when I put the submission in. So I've actually already put some thought into it. But that's why I would go with it. Just like if you're running a different offense, then I think like if you're running Lincoln Riley's offense, or actually he's probably a bad example because his quarterbacks don't have to run. But I'm trying to think of like if you're running Rich Rod's offense, elite arm power means very little. It's the timing and the elusiveness and scrambling that's more important. Like it just depends on the offense.
I think I'll go. Yeah, I get where you're coming from completely. Now that I've had time to think about it, I'm going to go buy elite timing, hold elite scrambling and slipperiness, and then sell elite arm power. And the biggest separator for me is 3 negates a bad offensive line. Like if you were to tell me that a good no matter what quarterback traits I would have as a starter, the offensive line is going to be shored up, then I would have Brian's order. But elite scrambling and being able to be elusive in the pocket, that negates a bad offensive line more than what an elite arm talent does. So that's probably the order I would go in. Then buy one, sell one, hold one. Specific traits as a defensive back starter. 1 is elite raw speed, 2 is elite length, and 3 is elite eyes ball hawking.
I'm going to buy elite eyes ball hawking, hold elite length, and sell elite raw speed. Because basically what you've just done with 2 and 3 is describe Cam Hart. Had great eyes, great length, not elite raw speed, and he was a great cornerback in 2023.
Yeah, agreed. Having elite eyes makes up for not having elite top end speed. I mean, that's Xavier Watts too. I mean, he didn't have like elite length, but I mean, knowing and having a good, strong football IQ and a good nose for the football negates running a 4.29.
Right. And I've seen guys that run real fast who are bad football players. And look, you can have, if you have, and the reason I went with the eyes over length is because if you have elite length, but don't have great, like eyes, then that limits your length. I think Xavier actually had pretty decent length for his size. He had almost 31 and a half inch arms, but he just had like you said, he had the great eyes. We've talked about this, Trev. I mean, I just think of the play against Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. There was that play, they ran like a jet sweep action And I remember watching like 10 Notre Dame players going in one direction and then watching Xavier go in the complete opposite direction and being like, dude, that guy is really good. You know what I mean? Like,
watching
that
it
kid's so good.
watching it on film from the end zone view was crazy.
Yes, it was.
Like, because it really just emphasizes how different he was. Yeah, man, I'm with you. And then buy one, sell one, hold one specific traits in an offensive line starter. 1 is elite mass, so good weight. 2 is elite upper body strength, and 3 is elite leg strength.
Buy elite leg strength, hold elite upper body strength, sell elite mass.
Yeah, I'm definitely buying elite leg strength. Definitely buying elite leg strength. It's a toss-up for me between elite mass and elite upper body strength. Yeah, it's honestly it's a tie for me between those.
The reason I'm going with the elite upper body strength is because I believe that makes up the difference for 10 or 15 pounds of weight. And we've seen plenty of guys, even just at Notre Dame, that have had great lower body strength, very strong upper bodies, but were like 200 and 295 pounds. Perfect example would be Zach Martin, who spent most of his Notre Dame career 290, 295. You know what I mean? So I think that's why I would go with that regard. Now, when we talk about not having elite mass, I'm not talking about a guy that's 270. I think that's an unrealistic thing. But like if a guy's 290, but he's got elite lower body and upper body strength, he'll be just fine. And you know who I knew that? Anthony Knapp. I mean, 290, you can say he's 300 pounds all you want. He won 300 pounds most of this year. He might have been 300 pounds at weigh-in and fall camp, but I promise you by mid-October, Anthony Knapp was not over 300 pounds. He's got elite lower body and upper body strength. Francis Brews, another example on the other side of the ball. 6'1", 280. But he moves people. Why? Because he's got elite upper and lower body strength. I've also seen some 330 pounders who can't move me off the line of scrimmage because they're big, soft teddy bears.
Yeah, that's fair. From Tommy Guns, you would buy, sell, or hold the over-under of 1.5 no-look touchdown passes by C.J. Carr.
So he just needs to get, one more than last year? I'll buy that.
Yeah, I'll buy that. If he did it on the road in his first career start for his first career touchdown pass, I think we could see more.
Sure.
I'm taking the over. Got some food ones. Buy one, sell one, hold one. Texas Roadhouse, Longhorn Steakhouse, or Applebee's.
I'm going to buy Texas Roadhouse. I love Texas Roadhouse. I love their steak. I love their sides. I love their bread. I love the atmosphere. I'm a big, big Texas Roadhouse fan. I'm going to hold Applebee's. Applebee's depends on who owns the chain. If we're assuming these are all well run, I actually like Applebee's. It's not great. I like it, but you can't go wrong with chicken tenders. Longhorn Steakhouse is a good place. It's just really expensive. And it's not a good enough steak for the cost. It's not good enough food for what it costs, in my opinion. They're basically the same as Texas Roadhouse in quality of food, maybe even slightly worse. They're just more expensive. So that's why Longhorn's my sell. They're all good places to eat though, but I'd rather go to Texas Roadhouse or Applebee's. Get more bang for my buck.
Yeah, I'd buy Texas Roadhouse for a lot of the same reasons. The only reason why I'm selling Longhorn Steakhouse is I've never eaten there. So I just can't. I could have had a bad meal at Applebee's, but it's still a meal opposed to the one that I did not have at Longhorn Steakhouse.
Sure.
Then we got Denny's, IHOP, and Waffle House.
So I'm gonna buy Denny's, hold Waffle House, and sell IHOP. I've eaten at Waffle House several times in my life, and I've always enjoyed their food. And I'm not a real prissy guy. I'm not a real fancy guy. I wear jeans and a t-shirt everywhere I go. So I kind of fit right in at a Waffle House. You know what I mean, Trev? Like as long as you give me clean things that I'm eating on, I'm good, man. So and I like Denny's. IHOP is really hit or miss for me. And it's 20 years ago, my answer would have been different. I loved IHOP when I was in college, but they have gone, I'll just say this. Maybe they have or have not. I don't know if they've like cheapened their ingredients. I just have not felt that their food is as good the last 10 years or so. Maybe it's just the ones around here, but I've just not been a big fan of IHOP. I don't think the quality of the food is as good. I've enjoyed my recent places at Denny's. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I'd probably. Yeah, I think I got the same order. I'd sell it all for Cracker Barrel, though. I love Cracker Barrel.
You and
It's
my
so
dad would get along. Yeah, remember Trev a couple weeks ago when my dad was mad at you for some of your answers in the movie thing?
Yeah.
You just made it up to him. You just made it up to him. He loves Cracker Barrel. I'm not a big Cracker Barrel fan, to be honest with you. It's okay. But my dad loves Cracker Barrel. So does my mother-in-law. They love Cracker Barrel.
So good.
Yeah.
I love it. Then another one from Tommy Guns. If you had to choose or go to jail, you would do which SF unit would you try for?
Which special forces unit? Yeah.
The Navy SEALs, the Army Green Beret, or the USAF, the United States Air Force, and I don't know what PJ stands
I think that stands for parajumpers, but I could be wrong. Let me just look that up. Let me see here what that stands for. I know it's a pararescue. Yeah, pararescue jumper. They're the unit, Trev, that the reason this is pertinent is they're the unit that basically rescued the 2 downed pilots in Iran. So if I was going to choose, I would go Army Green Beret would be my buy. I'm more of a grunt than a specialist, and you know what I mean? And I shouldn't even say that because Green Berets are, but when I mean Green Berets are more, they're like, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, they're like the best of the best, but they're not necessarily, I don't think the same as like Delta Force and Navy SEALs as far as like the unique specialization. Maybe I'm not correct on that, but I think they're a special group, but I kind of view them on the same line as like the Rangers. Like they're you know, they're not dudes you want to mess with, but they're more of, I have always felt frontline type guys as opposed to the special ops type of guys like Delta and Navy SEALs. Again, I could be wrong on that. That's just I never served in the military. Navy SEALs are kind of, you know, bad dudes, but I love the Navy SEALs. I love the show. But I'd rather be Delta Force if I could only pick between one of the two, and that wasn't offered here. The pararescue, I don't know that I'd be a great pararescue guy, but boy, they're amazing as well, and not a group that not a lot of people knew about until this past weekend. But salute to all of them. And here's the deal: the answer is I would be honored if I was good enough to be in any of those groups, but I wasn't. And I have a great deal for the part of the reason I have such respect for the military people is because they did choose to be in the front line if we go to battle. They did choose to put their life on the line. They did choose to be in the pararescue group, knowing that if we have a pilot go down behind enemy lines, we are the ones that have to go there and do that. Like I chose not to go down that road. I chose not to be in the military. I chose not to fight. I chose not to have to make those sacrifices that they all made. And so that's why I've always had such great respect for them, is because it's a choice that they make. They choose to put sacrifice everything, their lives, their families, everything to serve and defend and to fight and to protect, not just us, but freedom around the world. And I believe wholly in them and that mission. And that's why I have so much respect and honor for them. But the special ops, those are the best of the best. But I also have whether you're a special forces or you're just part of a bigger battalion, you know what I mean? Like all of y'all, man, I respect all of y'all. That's why I have the view of the military that I do. Are they perfect people? None of us are, but they're different. They're unique. They're special because they made the choice to do something that I had neither the ability nor the courage to do, knowing that what that would mean for them. And they're a special group. I'm also not a huge fan of flying, and you don't necessarily have to, always be jumping out of planes if you're a SEAL or a Green Beret. It's kind of in the definition of the last group.
Yeah, It's a flip of a coin for me between the Army Green Beret and the Navy SEALs. I'm selling with as much passion as I've ever sold anything. The United States Air Force parajumpers. A lot of respect for what they do. I always have respect for people that can do and are willing to do the things that I won't, but I would rather go to jail than jump out of an airplane. Like I just heights are something that I don't do. I'm good. And jail is on the ground.
That's true.
From Domer from the boot, 2 true freshmen get into the 2 deep in the early half of the season.
Bye.
Yeah, I'll buy that. I was going through the position groups in my head. I'll buy that as well. Then if Joe Rudolph gets both Leighton Von Brandt and Albert Simeon committed, he'll be considered one of or the best recruiter on the staff.
Now that Mike Mickens is gone, if he gets those 2 guys, I think he's going to be considered the best. If he gets both of those guys. Yeah.
Yep.
He's already,
agreed.
I mean, one thing he's been able to do is recruit so far. Like you got to get at least one of them. If he gets at least one of them, then he is what he is. And that's a good thing. If he gets both, it's like, okay, you're the new top dog from a recruiting standpoint. Because there's consistency to it. If Aaron Henry goes out and lands an elite DB class, it's like, okay, well, you did it once. Is that you? Is that Mike Mickens? He's done it over time, and he's done it year after year after year. And I think he gets a lot of credit for that.
How about this one? The 2027 NFL draft for Notre Dame will have the most names called in school history.
No, you'd have to throw a caveat. You can't say in history, because the reality is the NFL draft used to be 15 some rounds. I mean, there's years where Notre Dame had a mess of dudes picked. I mean, it was 30. I mean, look, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. In 1959, they had 10 guys picked. Only 4 of them were in the first 7 rounds. I mean, there were some huge. In 1954, see 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 guys picked in 1954. 1950 had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 12, 13 in 1950. Well, 6 of those 13 were taken from rounds 10 to 30. 1946 had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 guys picked in the first 20 rounds. If you want to say in the modern era, most in the modern era of 7 rounds, then I think it's a possibility. I think next year there's a possibility that you could see CJ Carr, at least 1 offensive lineman, if not 2, a wide receiver, if not 2, at least 1 defensive lineman. I think 2 linebackers, 2 corners, maybe a third in DJ McKinney, and maybe at least 1 or 2 safeties. Just off the top of my head, that's 10 to 12 guys. Like, yeah, here's the guys that I'm very confident will be picked next year. CJ Carr, Jordan Faison. If he plays a whole year, Ashton Craig, Boubacar Traore, Drake Bowen, Jalen Sneed, Leonard Moore, Christian Gray. That's 8 just right there. And that doesn't include, Jason Onye. And then Elijah Hughes is eligible for the draft after this year. I mean, he'll have to go to the draft because this is his 4th year, senior year. Then there's one of the 2 safeties, if not both. Then does one of the offensive linemen have a big year? You know what I mean? Like, does Jaden Greathouse have a big year and go pro? Does Cooper Flanagan go pro? Does Ty Washington go pro and have a chance? I mean, there's a lot of more potential pickups in there, Trev, that could be added to it on top of who's just naturally going to have to go to the draft or highly likely to go to the draft, like Leonard Moore. So you're talking 8, 9 before you even get to Adon Schuler and Tay Johnson and Jaden Osbury and Aeneas Williams and Jaden Greathouse and Cooper Flanagan and, Gerby Lambert, Anthony Knapp, all those other guys.
I think the even crazier thing is the players out of all of those that you listed that will probably go the highest don't even have to leave.
Mm-hmm.
CJ, Leonard Moore, Gerby Lambert, Anthony Knapp. It's crazy. Tay. Yep. That's wild.
Boubacar. Bubakar doesn't have to go pro.
Right.
I didn't even mention Bryce Young. I mean, there's a lot. Tion Gray. There's a lot of guys that could potentially be in that conversation.
Oh, yeah. From Ryan Michael, buy sell hold. Someone other than Aeneas Williams will lead the team in rushing yards, not APY. If buy, then who?
I'll sell. I mean, as of right now, I think he leads the team in rushing. I need to see a little bit more from the other guys. But I mean, as of right now, I still think he's their top rusher.
Agreed. Agreed completely. Then someone other than Faison or Greathouse will lead the team in receptions, including tight end. If buy, then who?
So I think one of those two guys will lead the team in receptions. If it's not one of those two guys, then I think it'll be Mylan Graham or Quincy Porter or Micah Gilbert, one of those three. But I think Greathouse or Faison will lead the team in catches.
Yeah, I'm selling that as well. I think it's going to be Faison. And then someone other than Faison and Greathouse will lead the team in yards, including tight end. If buy, then who?
Again, sell, but I think this one's more likely than the last one.
Yeah,
but I still sell. And it's the same names. It'll be a Mylan Graham, a Quincy Porter, a Micah Gilbert would be that option. But I think look, the two guys who led your team in catches the last 2 years are both back.
Yep.
Jaden Greathouse led them in catches in 2024, and Jordan Faison led the team in catches last year. Last year, Jordan Faison led the team in receiving yards, and he had more than Malachi Fields. With all due respect to Quincy Porter and those guys, if you can't have more, I'm sorry, Jaden Greathouse was number 2 in catches 2 years ago, one behind Mitchell Evans. He was number 1 in receivers, but he led the team in receiving yards by over 100. He led the team in receiving yards by more than what Jordan Faison did. But, if Jordan Faison has more yards and catches than Malachi Fields, I'm sorry that I'm not optimistic that Quincy Porter or Mylan Graham are going to have more catches and yards than Jordan Faison.
Same question, but for receiving touchdowns, Brian. If you buy it, then who is it going to be?
Sell. And if I'm wrong, I think it'll actually be a tight end.
Yep. Yep, I do too.
I could see the tight ends being really legit. Go ahead, Trev. You were about to explain. Go ahead and let you talk.
Oh, I think you have more of a red zone threat at the tight end position this year across the board. And if we're talking about like success rate, Cooper Flanagan has like 5 career catches and 3 of them have gone for touchdowns. Now, is he going to keep up that rate in 2026? I doubt it. But if over 50% of all of his receptions go for touchdowns, we're going to have a pretty fun year.
Mm-hmm. Agree.
And then someone other than Cooper Flanagan and James Flanagan will lead the team in non-blowout snaps at tight end. If buy, then who?
Sell. If we're wrong, because I don't want to just sell these and then not give you anything since you're saying. But it'd be Ty Washington would be my best bet, or Ian Premer. But I'd probably lean towards Ty Washington getting the most snaps.
Yep. As do I. And then Ian Premer will be the starting tight end by the end of the regular season. If you sell, then who will be?
So I could see Ian Premer in the 12 personnel starting lineup, but one of the Flanagans will still be ahead of him as the number 1.
Agreed. And then someone other than Bubakar Traore will lead the team in sacks. If you buy it, then who?
I sell it, and if I'm wrong, it'll be Bryce Young.
Yeah. Yep. Agreed. If Kingston were healthy, I will say that might get a little bit more interesting. Yep. But because of the injury, I'm with you with Bryce.
Agree.
Someone other than Drake Bowen will lead the team in tackles. If you buy, then who?
I sell it. If I'm wrong, it'll be a safety. It'll be a Don Schuler, Tay Johnson. That would be that's who I'll go with. I'll go with one of those two.
And then someone other than Leonard Moore and Tay Johnson will lead the team in interceptions. If you buy this, then who will it be?
I buy that. Christian Gray.
Yep. Same.
Yep. Good ones, Ryan.
Yeah.
And Trev, I think that is it. We did have one come in late. So I'm going to, we did have one come in kind of like right at the end. Where are we in this segment, Trev? When did we start this segment?
About a half hour ago. So we're good. Okay.
So we're good. We don't have, but there was a couple that just popped up last minute that were really close. But let me pull this buy so hold segment here real quick. We had a couple pop up late that we'll get to. Some of them were way late that we're not going to get to those, but there were a couple that popped up. So here's one from we'll kind of go rapid fire from Peter Knickles. Our quarterback. So I'll buy so hold and Trev, read them, and then you can respond to them. And if I have anything different, I'll respond. Number one, buy so hold. CJ Carr wins the Heisman.
Buy
so hold. Notre Dame offensive line will win the Joe Moore Award as the number one offensive line in the country.
I'll buy that.
Buy so hold. Our number one defensive back, and it could be anybody, will win the Jim Thorpe Award.
As fun as it would be to say I'm going to sell that because of the reasons we laid out before. It's the voters.
Yeah, I get that. Couple others here real quick. From Son of Donald, buy so hold. CJ Carr is the kind of young man who would actually consider returning to Notre Dame for a third season after winning a national championship.
I mean, I buy that he has that kind of character, but it's not indicative of who he would be. Like he's not a bad person if he leaves Notre Dame to go to the league.
Yeah. I didn't necessarily take it that way, Trev. I think it can be. I just kind of think of like he's the kind of guy that will not naturally just be like, I'm out. But I think people that are that way aren't. Like Quentin Nelson considered that. Jeremiah Love considered that. I don't think it makes them bad guys. I agree with you, but I do think he will consider it. I just don't think he'll consider it very long. And I think his consideration will be a lot more like what Jeremiah Love's was.
Absolutely. Like if they win it in the post-game interview, it'll be something like, hey, I got a lot to think about for next year, but right now I just want to enjoy this time with my team. And then in a couple weeks, we'll know his decision.
Right. I mean, I promise you that for at least a minute, Joe Burrow considered going back to college in 2020 for at least a second. You know, I mean, he had eligibility left. I mean, there's all you love college football. You love that life. You love the place you're at. It's going to at least be something you consider. It didn't say how long you'd consider it. And I think it'd be short. Buy so hold. Notre Dame has 7 players drafted in the first 2 rounds of next year's draft.
CJ Carr, Leonard Moore. I'm going to hold it for now because some of the players that I think could be taken in one of the first 2 days, like have a lot of reason to come back. Like Gerby Lambert could be one of those guys. I could see him coming back. Same thing with Tay Johnson. Yeah, 7 is a lot. So I'm going to hold it for now.
I'm actually going to sell it because even if a lot of guys come out, I mean, Drake Bowen could be the 3rd best linebacker in the draft and not go till the 3rd round.
Sure.
You know, I mean, it's possible, but let's just say he goes, you got CJ Carr. I don't think any of the linemen come out. They could, but I don't predict it right now. I think Boubacar is that high. I think Leonard Moore is that high. Let's just give Drake that high. That's 4. Now you're talking about even if both safeties come out and get picked in the first 2 rounds, that's only 6. Now to even get to 7, you need an offensive lineman to come out, Jordan Faison to be drafted higher, then be a day 2 early, first half of day 2 pick. You'd need one of the defensive linemen that we didn't, Bryce Young, Francis Brew, Tion Gray, Gerby Lambert, like. So that's a long list of guys to be taken in the first 2 rounds. And I'd sell that. I'd say 5 or 6 is most likely in the first 2 rounds. Just because part of it's just positional value. You could be the number 2 safety in the draft and not be a first-round draft pick. Be the number 1 safety in a draft class and potentially not be a first-round draft pick. I don't think that would be the case, but it's certainly possible, and it's kind of happened. So I'll sell that. That's a lot.
Yep.
That's a lot. Here's last 2, Trev. Buy so hold. Chris Ash wins the Broyles Award.
Sell for now because there's a ways to go that I need to see from him. And he ended the season on a strong note with the final 8 games, but I got to see what he's like against Miami and BYU. I'm not ready to hand over that crown if they shut down Wisconsin, Rice, and Purdue.
I'll say this, even if he is what we hope he is going to be, I still sell this because if they're going to have a Broyles Award winner, I still think it's Mike Denbrock. Because if the defense has the number 4 defense in the country and the offense is number 1, which we talked about, that Denbrock still gets it.
Yep.
And it goes in line with a lot of the other stuff. These things tend to happen in groups. If CJ's a Heisman finalist and the Joe Moore Award winner and all that, then necessarily Mike Denbrock's going to be even considered even higher for the Broyles than even Chris Ash would be, even if Chris Ash is everything that we all hope he can be this season.
Yep.
So, and then the last one is Notre Dame leaves the ACC behind after some shenanigans this coming season.
I mean, I'm going to hope sell it because I don't want there to be any more shenanigans. I mean, the partnership with the ACC, I'm fine with for now. You have that series coming up with Clemson. There's some things that I want to be reconstructed. I hope Miami's on there more consistently. I mean, I would be okay not playing Wake Forest again. You know, seeing SMU or Louisville on there more regularly. That would all be okay with me. But I leave it. No, I'm going to sell it just because that's a whole lot.
I would love for the relationship to come to an end because I'm tired of what the ACC does. My hope, however, is that the ACC got their heads out of their you-know-whats and stopped screwing Notre Dame over and picking fights with Notre Dame unnecessarily. My hope would be like you, Trev, listen to Pete Bavacqua. Hey, we want Clemson more. We want Miami more. We want Florida State more. And guess what? That's good for you. That's good for your league that we're playing those teams more. So Notre Dame had to take matters in their own hands to get Clemson on the schedule every year. And so ideally they would kind of get their heads out of the you-know-whats and realize, hey, Notre Dame's beneficial for us and we kind of almost ruined that. Let's not screw this up. That's my ultimate goal. I just don't have any faith that Jim Phillips is the kind of leader who can get that done.
Agreed completely.
So I'm going to sell it, but I'm with you, Trev. I'm going to. I mean that's why I'm going to buy it, but I'm going to hope. Ultimately, I'm with you. Let's hope sell it, and that because that means the ACC gets their heads out of their you-know-whats and gets back to being more valuable to Notre Dame, and then we don't have to worry about joining some other league or what this means or what that means or whatever else. And it's just like, at what point in time do you as a group realize you guys are the problem, not Notre Dame? Your basketball teams suck now; they're very mediocre. You had this great dominant Duke team. They couldn't even get to the Final Four. North Carolina is a middle-of-the-road team now. A lot of your teams are getting beat in the first, second round. The Big Ten dominates you on the football field. They now dominate you in basketball. You know, the Big East is even better than you in basketball now, Trev. You know what I mean? Like, when are you going to start realizing that's not because of Notre Dame and you guys need to fix your own house before you keep trying to take shots at Notre Dame? And by hurting Notre Dame, you actually hurt yourselves. You know, but I don't think they're smart enough to figure that out. Unfortunately
not.
Did the ACC have any teams in the Final Four in either men's or women's? They didn't, right? It was who Texas play in the Final Four? UCLA. So it's UCLA, Texas, South Carolina, and UConn. The ACC did not have a team in the Final Four of either the men's or women's championship. That would have been unheard of when I was younger. That would have been unheard of when you were younger. No teams in either men's or women's.
No Duke, no North Carolina, no
Notre Dame in women's basketball.
Yeah,
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm talking traditional ACC. I'm not even talking like Louisville when they won it in 13. You know, I mean, I think they might have still been in the Big East at the time. But like, I'm talking about traditional. No Duke, no North Carolina, no NC State. You know, no Virginia, who won the title recently. Like your conference sucks at a lot of things. Notre Dame even dominates you in hockey and lacrosse now. You know, so it's time to get your head out of your you-know-whats and realize that Notre Dame is part of your solution, not your problem.
100%. Folks, that's going to do it for us here on the afternoon show. But if you haven't gotten enough IB content today, which I'm sure you haven't, the guys are going live on IB Nation Sports Beat at 5:05. A lot of interesting topics. They're talking about playoff projections, and I believe they also have Tom Noy on this evening to talk about the max exodus of the men's basketball program.
Dumpster fire.
Not great going on right now. That is for sure. Brian and I will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. And then later on this week on Wednesday, we'll have the midweek rundown, which will include a practice report. So a lot of fun things going on here. On your way out of here, be sure to hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell. Be sure to share this podcast with your friends, family, anybody that you know loves Notre Dame and college football as much as you do. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So until tomorrow, that's Brian. I'm Trevor. See you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.